Hey friends, tonight, let's explore the deeply inconvenient, beautifully layered, and surprisingly philosophical world of getting dressed in 18th century China. Imagine this. It's barely dawn. Roosters are clearing their throats. The rice porridge isn't even warm yet, and you're already exhausted. Because dressing isn't a task. It's a ritual, an event, a slow-motion performance that says more about your status than your resume ever will. And you're the main actor, the wardrobe team, and the stylist all in one. So before you relax, take a second to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. And if you're watching from somewhere especially cozy, let us know your city and what time it is down in the comments. Turn down the lights perhaps, start a fan to create a soothing ambiance, and join me as we slowly dive into tonight's story. Your eyes blink open, half stuck with sleep, and already there's a sense of pressure in the air. No one is rushing you exactly, but time is moving like thick syrup. You swing your feet onto the cool tile floor and reach for the first item of the day, the underrobe. Yes, that's right. Before any proper garment, you must begin with the modest, often unseen base layer. It's thin, made of cotton if you're lucky, and usually stitched by someone's great aunt who knows exactly how to sew shame into a hem. Sliding into it feels strangely ceremonial. It wraps around you like a whisper. It's soft, but it already hints at the layers of social expectation about to follow. This is not just to keep you warm or dry. It's there to absorb your sweat before it contaminates the precious silk that the world will actually see. It's basically a human napkin you tie to your body. But you're not done. Never done. Because now you reach for your zhongyi, an inner jacket that's more jacket than inner. It's still not public-facing, mind you, but your mother would still cry if she saw you wrinkle it. It has to be laid on just right with the collar crossing left over right, unless you want to look like you're preparing for your own funeral. That's not a metaphor, by the way. In Chinese custom, crossing the collar right over left is reserved for corpses. One wardrobe mistake, and people might start mourning prematurely. You fumble with the small cloth ties along the collar. They're delicate, infuriating, and slightly smug. No buttons, no zippers, just soft fabric strips that dare your sleepy hands to mess up the symmetry. And yes, someone will notice if it's off-center. Everyone always notices. Once the jacket's secured, you pause. There's a small thrill in how crisp everything feels. It's like wearing a fresh thought. But that satisfaction is fleeting, because next comes the outer robe, and it weighs about as much as your breakfast regrets. It's beautifully embroidered, dyed with painstaking care, and feels like wearing an expensive curtain, but one you're not allowed to wrinkle sweat in or breathe too hard while wearing. This robe de Chong Pao, if you're a man of decent standing, is what tells the street who you are. It says, I'm not farming today. I'm thinking. The sleeves billow not for drama, though it helps, but to signal you're probably a scholar, or at least pretending convincingly. The length brushes the tops of your shoes, and heaven help you if it catches mud. Silk doesn't forgive. And speaking of shoes, have you found them yet? No laces, no elastic. You slide your feet into embroidered cloth shoes with soles so flat they make the floor feel personal. Left and right, shoes are, let's say, theoretical. They're identical. Your foot chooses its own adventure every morning. It's charming until you try walking fast. As you sit back down to smooth the folds, you begin to sweat. Not from heat, but from the realization that you're only halfway done. Because, dear friend, dressing isn't just about what you wear. It's also about how you wear it. You must sit in a way that respects the layering. Bend a knee wrong, and the robe puckers. Walk too quickly, and the wind lifts the hem with a scandalous swish. Even breathing requires calibration. You're not just alive, you're curated. Your mother pops in, gives you a glance, and points at your waistband. It's crooked. Again. You untie it, retie it, center it. She nods and disappears like a judgmental ghost. You don't question her. She's had 40 years of belt-centering experience and knows when your symmetry is off by a hair. Outside, your younger cousin yells that breakfast is ready. You yell back, not yet, and it's not an excuse. You still need to pin your hair, adjust your sleeve ties, and maybe burn a little incense if you're feeling spiritually wrinkled. And here's a lovely little absurdity. After all that effort, the average person still wears the same silhouette as their neighbors. The difference fabric embroidery shade of blue. A merchant wears dull brown, a scholar navy. A nobleman gets a splash of pine green, but not too much. Only the emperor gets yellow. Try wearing imperial yellow, and you'll discover the most efficient form of ancient cancel culture. It's now been 53 minutes. You've managed 3 layers, 2 belts, 0 food, and a growing existential awareness of your own sleeves. You haven't even considered jewelry yet. Or heaven forbid the seasonal variations: linen in summer padded cotton, in winter rain cloak made from oiled paper for surprise downpours. That last one smells like boiled radish and disappointment. And here's something oddly delightful. Some people stitched miniature good luck charms directly into their robe lining. A little fish made of silk. A coin-shaped talisman. A line of poetry only they could read, like secret pockets of personality in a society obsessed with conformity. Now you stand, tall, balanced, like a swan in 3 bathrobes. You walk slowly, practicing your steps so the layers ripple but don't tangle. You breathe through your nose, chin slightly lifted. You nod at your reflection, which looks back at you with faint exhaustion but undeniable grace. And you think quietly, this is ridiculous. But then again, isn't there something comforting in it? In the slowness, in the ritual, in knowing that every stitch, tie, and fold connects you, not just to your clothes, but to your culture, your family, your place in the world. Of course, that's a very poetic take. A more honest one: you're starving, you're late, and there's a weird thread poking your neck. Just another morning in the Qing dynasty. The sun is higher now, streaming through paper windows with a kind of glow that makes every dust particle feel poetic. But you're on the floor trying to put on your trousers, and it's not going well. These aren't ordinary pants. These are wide-legged, pleated, and tied at the waist with a cord so long it could probably be used to reel in a small ox. You hold them up and sigh. For something meant to be worn daily, they seem specifically designed to make you reconsider all your life choices. You step into them carefully, balancing on one foot while praying you don't fall into the dressing screen. These trousers queue aren't just wide, they're cavernous. You could host a tea ceremony in one leg and still have room for a bonsai tree. They billow out dramatically and then taper slightly at the ankle, the kind of silhouette that says, I own exactly 0 horses, but I like to look like I ride one recreationally. Once you tie the waistband twice, because once never holds you flat in the front with your palms. There's no zipper, no button, just an artfully gathered knot that's either traditional or a hazard depending on how tight you tie it. You sit back on your heels and exhale. One item down. 17 to go. Next comes your inner robe, a soft collarless shirt, worn under everything else. It's made of cotton or ramier, if you're lucky, and stitched with the quiet precision of someone who believes in ghosts and symmetry. You slip your arms through the sleeves and feel instantly more complete. It's thin, but not weak. This is the buffer zone between you and the world, a whisper of modesty, a promise of future sweat absorption. But wait, before you even think about the outer robe, there's another layer. Of course there is. This one is short, stiff, and has underarm gussets that feel like they were designed by a structural engineer. Its sleeves flare out a little, and the hem hits just at your hips. It's not especially flattering, but it signals that you are taking this whole being alive today thing seriously. By now, the room smells like linen morning breath and faint desperation. You stand up again, twist side to side, and test how much movement you have. Not much. Turning your torso feels like trying to do yoga wrapped in a carpet. You reach for your outer robe with the same reverence a monk might show a sacred scroll. This is the showpiece, the dramatic, sweeping hand-dyed layer that people will actually see. The robe that says, I have manners. I have class. I've probably read books about morality. The robe slides on with a satisfying weight. It's cool against your skin and moves like water when you walk. You cross the collar left over right, always left over right, and tie the internal cords to keep it shut. Then you wrap the cloth belt around your waist and tie it in a careful bow. Not too tight, not too loose. Too tight, and you'll look nervous. Too loose, and the wind might expose your secrets. Then, thud, a knock on the outer gate. You freeze, not because you're startled, but because you're not finished. You forgot your socks. Socks are their own ordeal, thick, quilted, sometimes embroidered, definitely not stretchy. You sit back down and wrestle your feet into them. They're stiff like folded dumplings and have a personality all their own. Once on, they make your feet look simultaneously regal and absurd. You love them. You hate them. They are your destiny. Now shoes. Beautiful cloth shoes with hard soles and impossible embroidery. They're identical, so you guess which is left and which is right. You get it wrong. You try again. Eventually, you settle into them like someone accepting the consequences of an arranged marriage. They're not comfortable. They're not meant to be. You take one final look in the bronze mirror. Your hair is a little wild, but your robes are crisp. Your socks are visible. Your belt is well fine. You are at last socially acceptable. You can leave the room, except you can't. Your grandmother is standing by the doorway holding a folded fabric square with a raised eyebrow. You forgot the doudan, a rectangular chest cloth that covers your inner shirt, because showing the inside layers directly is uncouth. You take it from her drape, it adjusts it, and nod. She nods back. It's the most intense 2-second generational exchange you've ever experienced. You step outside. The The sky is still early morning blue. Neighbors are walking their chickens. A few children are already reciting Confucian passages. And here you are, overdressed, underfed, and oddly proud. Because this entire dressing process isn't about comfort. It's about ritual. About showing the world you respect yourself enough to suffer mildly before breakfast. And it is suffering. The ties chafe, the sleeves tangle, the socks bunch, but you've done it. You've woven yourself into the daily tapestry of Qing life, one knot at a time. And then your little cousin runs past and yells, "Your collar's crooked." You freeze, look down, and feel the quiet devastation of defeat. Still you smile. Because that's the thing about these rituals. You'll do it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. It's tiring, it's silly, it's beautiful. And somehow it makes you feel like part of something bigger than just yourself. You've made it out the door, but barely. Your robes brush the ground with each step, not quite sweeping the dust, but stirring it just enough to remind you how long it took to get here. Your belt feels slightly too tight now, and your collar itches in that special way only a perfectly arranged collar can. Still, you walk with dignity, or at least with the slow, cautious pace of someone terrified of tripping on their own hems. You're not going far. Just across the courtyard to the ancestral hall where today's ritual awaits the incense offering. But before that, you must pass your father. He's seated by the pond, sipping tea and pretending not to notice you. You bow slightly enough to show respect, but not enough to shift your robe out of balance. He gives you the tiniest nod. That's approval. That's validation. That's a silent contract stating that your outfit meets family expectations. And now, the real test begins: sitting. Sitting in Qing Dynasty robes is not a casual act. It is a deliberate performance executed with care, muscle control, and fear. You lower yourself slowly, keeping your knees together, guiding your sleeves like a conductor, leading an orchestra of fabric. You land with a soft whump on the wooden bench and immediately reach for your sleeves to drape them over your knees. You don't want them touching the floor, not because it's dirty, but because it's undignified. As you sit there upright and symmetrical, your mind begins to wander mainly to the concept of underwear. Specifically, how this many layers somehow never include anything truly secure. There's no elastic, no snap-tight waistband. Everything is a series of fabric loops, gravity, and blind faith. You're one loose knot away from social ruin. Your sister walks by dressed in equally layered finery, though hers includes intricate embroidery of cranes and plum blossoms. She glances at your hairline and says, "You forgot your forehead ribbon." You groan silently. The forehead ribbon, a narrow band of silk tied just above the brows, isn't just decorative. It's considered necessary for a tidy appearance. You excuse yourself, return to your room, and dig through your accessories box until you find the right one, sky blue, with a tiny embroidered swirl that matches your inner robe. Tying it is tricky. It needs to be snug, but not headache-inducing. You finally get it right on the third try, checking in the mirror to confirm you don't look like you're preparing for a martial arts tournament. With everything in place again, you head back out. The walk of shame is less shameful when your ribbon matches. Finally, you reach the incense table. You bow 3 times, precisely, not too fast, not too deep. Then light the slender stick and wave it gently until the smoke rises in a thin, elegant spiral. The ash begins to curl, and the smell of sandalwood and dried orange peel fills your nose. You're meant to reflect on family virtues, but all you can think about is how sweaty your back is. You reach your gate, remove your shoes, and step inside. The world changes immediately. Inside is calm, dimmer. You breathe in the faint scent of camphor wood and dried chrysanthemum. You unwrap the cloth, place it on the altar-like sewing table, and breathe again. Mission accomplished. As the incense burns down, you sit again, this time in a low stool with no backrest. Your spine protests, but your robe flows neatly over your knees like water over stone. You reach for the teacup set before you. Porcelain, thin-lipped, still warm. You lift it carefully, 2 fingers under thumb, on top, like you've practiced. Because drinking tea like dressing is a statement of grace, of upbringing, of the thousands of invisible lessons passed down in silence. The tea is slightly bitter, as it should be. It balances the morning's sweetness, if you can call sweating through 4 layers sweet. You sip and close your eyes, trying to find a still moment in the swirl of fabric and ceremony. Then comes the daily inspection. Your mother appears. She says nothing, simply walks around you, slowly adjusting a hem here, smoothing a crease there. She straightens the corner of your dudan, lifts your collar slightly, and pulls a stray thread from your sleeve with the precision of someone who's been dressing people since before you could walk. She says only one word before leaving: better. You'll take that. With the morning rituals done, you finally walk toward the gate. The city beyond is waking up. Vendors shout, prices, carts rattle across stone roads, and children dart between crowds with kites and rice cakes. You're not headed to the market. Today, you have a lesson with your tutor, and that means another layer, your scholar's coat. This coat is thick, not just in material, but in meaning. It has wider sleeves than your robe, fastens with toggles shaped like lotus pods, and bears the subtle pattern of bamboo leaves woven into the fabric. It's a garment that says, I take calligraphy seriously, even if your handwriting says otherwise. You put it on with care. Your arms know the movement now, shoulder pull, fold tie. You straighten your back as you walk, because this coat demands posture. And you can't help but feel it, how the clothes shape you quite literally. You walk slower, stand taller, and think twice before scratching your nose. But that's the unspoken truth, isn't it? The point of all these layers isn't just to cover, it's to transform, to turn sleepy villagers into scholars, merchants into gentlemen, daughters into brides. It's less about fashion, more about role-playing, but with real consequences. Just as you reach the study hall, a breeze picks up. It lifts the hem of your outer robe, sends your sleeves fluttering like flags of minor nobility, and you clutch your collar out of instinct. Everyone nearby does the same. A silent choreography, rehearsed daily, and maybe that's the most comforting part. No one escapes the ritual. The rich, the poor, the in-betweens. Everyone's adjusting something. Everyone's wrinkling, tugging, tightening. Even the emperor has to worry about collar symmetry. He just has more people to do it for him. You step inside the hall, robes rustling against the polished wood. You bow to your tutor. He bows back. Then he pauses, squints, and points at your waistband. It's crooked again. Your tutor doesn't scold you. He simply sighs, takes a sip of tea, and gestures for you to fix it. There's something in that sigh that says, you'll get it right, eventually mixed with, or you won't. And that's also part of the lesson. You discreetly adjust the belt as you kneel down on the straw mat, robes carefully folded beneath you. The sleeves must be arranged outward, never crumpled behind you, lest you appear undignified even in failure. Today's lesson begins not with reading, but with bowing. You bow to the tutor, then to the Confucian tablet at the front of the room, and finally to the text itself. Yes, even books get a bow. You lower your head before the worn bamboo scroll, its edges curled, and ink faint but dignified. It smells faintly of camphor and dust, like wisdom marinated in time. The scroll rests on a low table next to an inkstone that looks like it's judged generations of handwriting and found them all slightly disappointing. As you begin copying the first passage, your sleeves keep getting in the way. You try tucking them back, but they slide forward again, lazy with silk and slightly mischievous. Eventually, your tutor hands you a pair of sleeve restraints, 2 embroidered bands you tie around your arms to keep the sleeves from flopping into the ink. They work mostly. You feel slightly like a restrained bird trying to peck words onto a page. Each stroke of the brush is slow, deliberate. The characters bloom and fade on the page like thoughts hesitating into form. Your handwriting is decent, though the characters for virtue and patience still give you trouble ironic, considering how long you've spent practicing both. The morning sun angles through the paper windows, casting soft stripes across the floor. Time folds inward. The brush moves. The robe breathes. You forget for a moment about your crooked belt and itchy collar. Midway through the lesson, your tutor pauses and says, "Do you know why scholars wear wide sleeves?" You blink. You think you know. To show status, to signal education. Because tight sleeves are for soldiers and farmers. He smiles, sensing your uncertainty, and offers his answer: to carry nothing and yet always seem full. You sit with that for a moment. It's absurd. It's poetic. It's not entirely wrong. After the lesson, you bow again, roll up your scroll, and walk back toward the main hall. Your steps are quiet against the polished stone. The wind has picked up slightly, and you grip your robe tighter at the waist. The courtyard is beginning to bustle. Servants are sweeping. A neighbor is yelling at a goose. Somewhere, a bell tolls softly, announcing the hour. And now, it's time to change clothes. Yes, again. Because, after study, comes domestic duty. You're expected to help supervise lunch preparation, and silk robes are not known for their compatibility with chopping vegetables. You return to your room, untie your belt, and begin the slow process of transformation once more. Off comes the scholar's coat folded neatly. Off comes the outer robe placed reverently on a lacquered hanger. You're down to your inner shirt and trousers, now the base layer, the workhorse of your wardrobe. You slip into a simpler cotton tunic, dyed a soft gray blue, with sleeves that narrow at the wrist and buttons, actual buttons made of bone. They fasten easily. The relief is almost overwhelming. You breathe easier. You feel lighter, more human. In the kitchen, the smells are glorious. Ginger sizzling in oil, scallions sharp and green. Steam rises from the wok in heavy bursts that coat your face with warmth and a faint layer of sesame. You fan the fire while a cousin stirs the pot, both of you synchronized in a rhythm older than either of you truly understands. There's laughter from the courtyard. Someone sings a folk tune off-key. You hum along, but even here, clothing matters. Your sleeves are rolled just right. Your tunic is clean. Your belt, though, made of rougher fabric, is tied properly. You're not a servant after all. Just someone who still has to earn their midday meal. After the fire's out and the rice is steaming gently in its clay pot, you step back, wipe your brow, and feel the sweat sticking the tunic to your spine. You don't mind. This sweat feels honest, earned. You're allowed to smell faintly of garlic here. Lunchtime arrives with the clink of porcelain and a chorus of small talk. The family gathers on floor mats around a low table. No one eats yet. First, everyone admires the food. It's an aesthetic experience, colors, arrangement. Even the steam is considered. Then the head of the household says a few words, and only then does the chopstick symphony begin. You're careful not to slouch. Sitting properly, even in your more relaxed clothing, still requires awareness. One wrong elbow and your aunt might arch a judgmental brow high enough to sprain something. You eat slowly, bite by bite, aware that every chew is part of the social performance. When lunch ends, you return to your room again. You wash your hands, change back into your formal robes, yes again, and prepare for the afternoon errands. This time, you select a lighter outer layer, a robe of pale linen, suited for walking, but still acceptable for being seen in public. You comb your hair, retie your ribbon, and adjust your collar with the kind of muscle memory that only develops through daily frustration. As you step outside again, you realize something strange. The outfit no longer feels foreign. It's still fussy, yes? Still a challenge. But it fits now, not just your body, but your mind. You've adapted to it. You've submitted slightly to the weight of ritual. And in doing so, you've found a rhythm. You pass a neighbor sweeping the threshold of their home. She looks up, sees your properly tied belt, and gives a small approving nod. You nod back, feeling absurdly like you've accomplished something profound. And maybe you have. Because here in 18th century China, dignity isn't found in grand gestures. It's in the layers. You wear the knots, you tie the silence you endure, and the sleeves you keep clean, even when they're still always getting in the way. The streets are alive now, an orchestra of wooden wheels, straw, sandals, and gossip that floats between laundry lines like drifting smoke. You walk slowly because everyone walks slowly, not out of laziness, but out of necessity. Your robes, light though they may be today, still demand deliberation. One sharp turn, and the wind could expose your knees, or worse, your poor layering technique. So you glide, or at least attempt to, letting the soles of your shoes whisper against the stone path like a soft percussion line under a larger melody. You're headed to the fabric merchant, a weekly errand. Your mother has tasked you with choosing a new bolt of cotton sky blue, if available, light enough for underlayers, but thick enough to hold shape. That may sound straightforward. It's not. You carry with you a sample of thread, a reference swatch, a tiny paper note with exact dye shade specifications, and a mental map of the merchant's fabric shelves dating back 2 seasons. Because getting it wrong doesn't just mean inconvenience. It means lectures. Long, meandering, Confucian-infused lectures. When you arrive, the shopkeeper greets you with a smile so wide it creases the faded embroidery on his collar. He's wearing a patched-up tunic, but it's clean, symmetrical, and properly tucked. You return the bow. There's a quiet competition here, even in gestures, whose sleeves flow best, whose shoes scuff the ground, least whose belt sits at the mathematically correct midpoint between chest and hip. He leads you to the cotton section with the solemnity of a priest revealing sacred texts. You touch each bolt carefully. Cotton isn't just cloth. It's mood. Some are coarse, but honest, others smooth, but prone to shrinking in humidity. You pinch, stretch, hold to the light. You run a mental simulation of how it will fall when stitched, how it will absorb sweat, how it will crease beneath a scholar's coat or a child's nap. Eventually, you find it a pale, almost translucent blue with a subtle herringbone weave. It reminds you of early morning sky filtered through bamboo blinds. You nod. He nods. No words needed. You know what you're doing. So does he. Transaction done. You carry the cloth home, wrapped in paper, secured with twine, and tucked carefully into your sleeve. Yes, your sleeve. These aren't just for show. Wide sleeves are ancient tote bags. They carry letters, coins, brushes, and in your case, 1.5 meters of domestic obligation. As you walk back, a gust of wind stirs your robe. You press your hand against your waist to keep the fabric down. A group of children runs past their sleeves, flying like flags, laughing in high, delighted shrieks. One of them is wearing a miniature version of the Chang Pao, complete with a tiny embroidered crane. It's a sight both adorable and mildly intimidating, because even the youngest citizens are already bound to the same sartorial expectations. If your robe is a performance, theirs is an apprenticeship. You reach your gate, remove your shoes, and step inside. The world changes immediately. Inside is calm, dimmer. You breathe in the faint scent of camphor wood and dried chrysanthemum. You unwrap the cloth, place it on the altar-like sewing table, and breathe again. Mission accomplished. But now it's time to bathe. Bathing, much like dressing, is not a simple process. It is a logistical event requiring hot water, a clean basin, multiple towels, and at least one attending sibling to keep the cat from jumping into the water. You remove your robes piece by piece, folding each one with reverence. Even when soaked in sweat, they deserve respect. The inner layer clings slightly as you peel it off, a wet reminder of how much effort it took to look composed. The water is warm. Not hot. Fuel is expensive, but warm enough to soften the tightness in your shoulders. You wash quickly but thoroughly. The soap smells of rice, bran, and mint. You scrub your neck, careful not to dislodge the thoughts still clinging from your tutor's lessons. You rinse stand and dry yourself with a coarse cloth that feels both clean and vaguely punishing. Now the fun part begins redressing. This time, you opt for your evening robe. It's a faded indigo, soft from years of wear, with patches so artfully stitched they almost seem intentional. You wrap it loosely, tie it without ceremony, and let the sleeves hang in gentle defiance of the day's precision. This robe doesn't care if your collar is perfect. This robe forgives. You step onto the veranda robe, billowing gently as you pour yourself a cup of warm tea. The steam rises like a whisper. The sun has begun its descent, casting long golden beams across the courtyard. A few birds flit across the roofline. Someone nearby is playing a two-stringed erhu, the notes low and mournful. You sip and listen. You don't need to move. The moment moves around you. Your mother appears at your side, her own robe a muted maroon with a faded chrysanthemum print. She doesn't speak, just sits. The silence between you is comfortable. She examines your belt, your collar, your sleeve, finds no fault. Then, after several minutes, she says, "Tomorrow, you'll wear the green robe. We have guests." You nod. The green robe, the heavy one, the one with the gold trim and the stiff neckline. You take another sip of tea and mentally prepare for the 2-hour preparation it will require. But not yet. Now is for softness, for fabric that breathes, for tea and string music and the quiet pride of having made it through another day without tripping over your own sleeve in front of someone important. And maybe, just maybe, for a few minutes, you forget how long it took to get dressed this morning. Night settles like silk draped across the sky, smooth and cool with a faint scent of lamp oil in the air. The household moves into evening rhythms, quiet conversation, the soft clink of teacups, the occasional bark of a dog from the neighboring courtyard. You, however, have one more task, preparing the green robe for tomorrow. You retrieve it from the chest with a careful touch, unfolding it slowly, the fabric rustling like dry leaves. It's heavier than you remember, dyed deep forest green with accents of pale gold stitched into the borders in swirling cloud motifs. As you lift it up to the lamplight, you see that the inner lining has begun to fray slightly near the hem, not enough to be seen, but enough to bother someone like your mother, who notices such things the way hawks notice mice in tall grass. You set the robe on the lacquered table and smooth it out with your palm. The surface is cool and hard in contrast to the robe's soft density. You reach for the wooden brush, dip it in a bowl of warm water, and begin gently brushing out the creases. This is not a task for haste. If you press too hard, you'll leave streaks. Too soft, and the folds will stay. So you move in slow circular motions, coaxing the fabric into calmness as if you're asking it politely to behave tomorrow. As you work, your mind drifts, wondering not for the first time how many hours of life are spent in preparation for events that last mere minutes. A family visit, a dinner, a ceremony so brief, yet dressed in hours of labor. Once the robe is smooth, you hang it from the carved wooden rack near the window, where the last traces of moonlight will bless it through the screen. You step back and observe your handiwork, and for a moment you feel like a curator rather than a wearer, like the robe is a museum piece, and you are its guardian. Satisfied, you change into your night robe. It's softer still than the evening one, made of brushed cotton with a faint lavender scent clinging to the fibers. The sleeves are narrower, the belt looser, the collar wider, designed not for display but for sleep, for surrender, for the quiet hours when even performance is allowed to rest. Before bed, you sit by the lamp and write in your small journal tucked inside the lowest drawer of your dressing cabinet. You write about the fabric shop, about the child with the miniature scholar's robe, about the sleeve restraints, and how your tutor's size seem to carry entire essays. You write about the way your mother looked at the green robe with pride and pressure folded together like a double-stitched seam. You pause after each line, listening to the cicadas begin their night song, slow and hypnotic, like nature's version of embroidery, repeating precise, unchanging, yet somehow never boring. When the oil in the lamp begins to sputter, you close the journal and extinguish the flame. Darkness wraps around the room like another robe, one you can't fold or iron, but must accept as it is. You lie down on the bamboo mat, adjusting the thin summer quilt over your body, and pull the pillow of buckwheat husks under your head. The familiar crinkle and crunch is oddly comforting. As your body begins to relax, you feel every layer you wore today as a kind of echo-faint pressure on the shoulders, the ghost of a belt around your waist, the remembered weight of outer robes brushing against your calves. Sleep, however, doesn't come easily, not because of discomfort, but because of anticipation. You replay tomorrow's events in your head, the arrival of guests, the required greetings, the pacing of your steps as you serve tea, the precise angle at which to tilt your head during conversation. It's not fear, it's choreography. Like rehearsing a play in which your lines are made of bows, your costume stitched from tradition. Eventually, the rhythm of the night draws you in. The sound of distant temple bells, the rustling leaves outside, the hush of slippers across polished floors, all of it weaving together into a lullaby, known only to those raised in households where silence has rules. And as your breath deepens, your last thought before slipping under, is this even sleep? Is a kind of dressing down, a shedding of silk, and duty, a return to the soft skin beneath it all. Morning arrives like a quiet drumbeat, soft thuds of footsteps in the hall, the creak of doors opening, and the familiar metallic hiss of the kettle heating on the stove. You open your eyes, slowly, blinking against the pale light that filters through the rice paper screen. It's not fully bright yet, but the air carries that subtle urgency unique to days when guests are expected. You sit up, already aware that today won't be yours. It belongs to the green robe hanging by the window, waiting like an overly polite supervisor with a checklist. You swing your legs off the mat and immediately feel the change in energy. Your sister is already awake, bustling somewhere in the next room, her movements marked by the swish of fabric and the occasional clatter of hairpins. You rise, stretch once, cautiously, so as not to loosen the discipline you're about to impose on your body, and approach the robe. It greets you with weight, not metaphorically. It's actually heavy, the kind of garment that reminds you how gravity works. You begin the process, as always, starting with the inner layers. The cotton shift goes on easily, already softened from years of wear. Over it, the middle robe crisp and slightly stiff from yesterday's pressing. Tying the inner sash takes 3 tries. Your fingers are clumsier today, probably from nerves or lack of breakfast. Finally, you lift the green robe off the rack. It's cool to the touch, even after a full night hanging in the warmth of the room. The moment you slip your arms into the sleeves, the air shifts. Your posture straightens. Your chin tilts upward almost involuntarily. It's not a transformation so much as an assumption of responsibility, of elegance, of the role expected of you today. You secure the robe at the waist with the formal belt, a deep indigo strip with gold thread embroidery of stylized peonies. The buckle clicks softly into place. Then you reach for the accessories. A jade pendant tied with red cord slides into your sash. A handkerchief, embroidered, of course, folds neatly into your sleeve. A sachet of dried magnolia blossoms is tucked behind your collar. Its scent light but noticeable, a nod to hospitality without crossing into ostentation. Finally, the hair. You sit before the mirror, comb in hand, and begin smoothing your hair back into the correct form. Not the relaxed bun of study days, or the braided twist of household chores. Today's is a higher knot secured with a polished wooden pin and reinforced with a loop of black silk cord. When you stand again, everything feels correct. Not comfortable, but correct. You take a few careful steps across the room, testing the flow of fabric, the swing of sleeves, the drag of the hem across polished wood. Nothing catches, nothing sags. You are ready, or as ready as you can be, when you know you'll be judged by the depth of your bow and the crispness of your silhouette. Breakfast is quiet. The family eats in subdued coordination, each person aware of what's to come. Your mother gives you a once-over and nods without a word. That from her is equivalent to applause. Your younger cousin eyes wide whispers that you look like someone in a painting. You smile, which is risky. It could wrinkle the corners of your face, but you do it anyway, just once. When the guests arrive, the entire house seems to inhale. The door creaks open, shoes are exchanged for slippers, and greetings begin like waves lapping at the shore first, formal, then flowing. You bow deeply, arms folded just right, letting your sleeves fall forward in elegant arcs. The green robe holds its shape perfectly, and for a fleeting moment, you're grateful for all the effort. The compliments begin as expected. Such fine embroidery, says one aunt. That shade of green is rare, says another. Ah, adds the family friend who knows fabrics, is this southern silk. You smile modestly as rehearsed and answer with practiced humility that deflects praise without rejecting it. It's a dance, a polite duel of pleasantries and modesty. Tea is served next. You move to the serving table, lifting the porcelain pot with both hands, pouring with precision into cups that seem deliberately small. Your sleeve hovers just above the rim, close enough to prove you're doing it correctly, but not so close as to dip in. You offer the cups in the correct order, bowing just slightly each time. By the end, your back aches in places you didn't know had nerves. And yet, through it all, there is a rhythm. You begin to understand why this matters, why dressing a certain way can shift the energy in a room. It's not about vanity. It's about anchoring yourself in something older, something steady. The robe becomes a structure, a boundary, a shared language that says, I understand the rules, and I choose to follow them, not because I must, but because I value what they represent. As the day stretches on, conversations meander through poetry, trade, family history, and the health of plum trees. Children are scolded gently for running. Dishes are changed with almost invisible signals between servants. You excuse yourself briefly and step into the corridor to breathe. The silence feels thick in contrast to the bright noise inside. You rest your hand on the door frame and feel the weight of the robe pulling at your shoulders. Not unpleasantly, but like a gentle reminder, this is who you're expected to be today. Later, when the guests leave and the final bows are exchanged, you return to your room and finally untie the belt. The robe loosens around you like an exhale. You let it fall onto your arms and fold it gently, placing it on the bench for airing before storage. You sit down in your cotton shift hair slightly loosened and drink a cup of cool tea left from earlier. It tastes different now, less ceremonial, more honest, and you think, not for the first time, how strange it is that a piece of clothing can shape an entire day. It didn't change your thoughts, not really, but it wrapped them in silk and formality and made you speak them differently. Maybe that's what clothing does, best not conceal, but channel, not suppress, but refine. The sun has dipped behind the western wall by the time you begin putting things away. The green robe, now aired and respectfully folded, is returned to its cedar-lined chest, layered carefully between pressed mulberry leaves and rice paper that smells faintly of tea. You close the lid with both hands, a quiet gesture of ending. But your day isn't over. Not yet. Because there's one more part of this evening. To prepare for visiting the calligraphy studio of your great-uncle, a family tradition that occurs every 8th night, whether anyone feels like it or not. You wash your face, comb your hair back into a simpler knot, and change into your dusk robe. This one is a deep blue, soft and unstructured, but still dignified enough to wear in the presence of old scholars. You tighten the sash, slip a brush case into your sleeve, and head out through the side gate under a sky scattered with stars, just beginning to appear, their light shy and pale like secrets not yet told. The streets are quieter now, but not asleep. You pass by open courtyards where families are still eating, their laughter rising like smoke into the warm evening air. You keep walking, letting the rhythm of your sandals match the slow pulse of the neighborhood. The calligraphy studio is set back from the main road, its wooden doors half open, welcoming and stern at the same time. Inside, the smell of ink is immediate, earthy, sharp, and somehow meditative. Great Uncle sits at the central desk, sleeves rolled, brush in hand, mid-stroke on a wide scroll that stretches nearly the length of the table. He does not look up when you enter, but you bow anyway, deeply and without sound. He finishes, the character lifts the brush and nods once. That's your invitation to sit. You settle on the cushion beside him, unwrap your brush, and prepare the ink. The stone is already wet. You begin to grind slowly, rhythmically, the brushstone singing its low song under your palm. There's something ancient in this motion, something that links you to generations of hands that ground ink before speaking truth. You're not here to talk. That's understood. Talking is for meals. Here, in this room of paper and shadow, the brush speaks. You dip, lift, breathe, and begin. The first character is wrong. The second is worse. The third begins to form properly, and by the fourth, you've found your hand again. Great Uncle glances over hums in that way that could mean acceptable or disgraceful, depending on the phase of the moon. You keep going. After a while, he offers a correction, not in words, but by standing, taking your brush, and writing a single perfect version of the character you just ruined. Then he sits. That's the lesson. You nod in thanks and try again. Time stretches here, elastic and unhurried. Your back begins to ache, your wrist cramps slightly, but you stay. Not out of obligation, but because the act itself is strangely calming. Each stroke slows your thoughts, quiets the day's noise. The robe you're wearing rustles faintly each time you shift, a reminder that even in this silent room, the world presses gently against you. When you finally put the brush down, it's not because you're finished, it's because your eyes are tired and the lantern's light has begun to flicker. Great Uncle stands and walks to the wall where he keeps the finished scrolls. He selects one, brings it over, and hands it to you. It's a poem about plum blossoms in snow. The characters sharp and elegant, the paper still smelling faintly of pine smoke. You bow again, deeper this time. He does not smile, but his nod is slower, almost warm. You tuck the scroll into your sleeve and prepare to leave. The walk home is darker. The lamps along the street glow softly behind their wooden grills, casting patterned light on the ground. Your robe flutters with each step, brushing against your ankles in a rhythm that almost sounds like whispering. You feel the scroll against your side, a weight that is not heavy, but meaningful. It feels like carrying thought in physical form, like wearing a secret. When you return home, the household has settled. Only a few lamps remain lit. You slip into your room, place the scroll carefully beside your writing desk, and change into your night robe. The air is cooler now, and the robe's brushed lining feels like a soft exhale against your skin. You sit by the window for a moment, before lying down, letting the night hum around you. Somewhere in the distance, a lute is being played, slow minor notes drifting into the air like pieces of a dream. You think back to the strokes on the page, to the way your great-uncle moved his wrist, to the whisper of your sleeve on the paper. And you wonder again what it means to wear something that shapes not just your body, but your mind. A robe that commands silence. A robe that teaches patience. A robe that in its folds and layers carries stories too quiet for words. You wake before the roosters, not because you must, but because something in your body has learned the rhythm of days ruled by garments and gestures. The sky outside is still dark, the horizon just beginning to bleed pale blue into the edges of the blackness. You lie there for a moment, staring at the wooden beams above your bed wrapped in your night robe, listening to the creak of the house adjusting itself around you. It is a small sound, like a yawn held in, but it tells you that the world is slowly beginning again. Today is laundry day, not the kind where a few garments are washed and hung to dry, but the full domestic ritual that comes around every 10th day. A shared effort, a family performance, and if you're not careful, a source of damp chaos. You slip out of bed and pad softly to the courtyard, still wrapped in the same robe, though now belted and with sleeves tucked up. The air is cool, and your breath is visible a faint mist against the early light. Your aunt is already there, sleeves tied behind her back, with a length of faded silk standing over a large ceramic basin. The scent of rice water and ash soap fills the air. She nods when she sees you and gestures toward the folded pile of robes that await their turn in the cold water. You begin by sorting. Inner layers here, outer garments there, silk in one stack, cotton in another. It's not just about cleanliness, it's about respect. Every robe carries memory, a frayed hem from walking too quickly through gravel, a faint stain where tea dripped during a nervous greeting, the stiffness in the collar from the time you stood too long in the sun while waiting for an elder to finish their story. As you unfold each piece, you see those memories stitched into the fibers. Washing them is not just about removing dirt. It is about tending to those quiet burdens, easing them, letting them breathe again. You start with a cotton robe, one of your older ones, soft and familiar. You dip it into the basin, swirl it through the soap mixture, and scrub gently with a wooden brush. The fibers resist at first, as they always do, then relax under the pressure. Your fingers grow numb from the cold water, but you keep going. Beside you, your cousin hums a tune while wringing out a pair of trousers, her hands red from the same icy bath. You glance at her and share a tired smile. There is a camaraderie here in shared discomfort and soggy sleeves that transcends formality. The silk garments take longer. They must be handled delicately, soaked in separate basins, pressed rather than wrung. Each movement is measured, each fold respected. You smooth them out on wooden boards in the sun, adjusting their corners like you're setting the edge of a scroll. It's oddly satisfying, this act of bringing fabric back to life. The wrinkles soften, the colors deepen in the light, and you feel, despite your chapped knuckles and wet shoes, a sense of quiet accomplishment. As the robes dry, you take the time to brush and air out those not yet ready for washing. The winter outer coat, for instance, is still too heavy for the basin. Instead, You hang it over the bamboo pole, patting the sleeves gently with a padded mallet to shake out dust and sleeping moths. You check the lining for wear, the collar for loosened threads. These inspections are not just chores, they're acts of continuity, ensuring that what dressed you yesterday can dress you again tomorrow. Once everything is hung and flapping gently in the late morning breeze, you sit down on the threshold of the courtyard barefoot and wrapped in a thin drying cloth. Your hands sting, your arms ache, but your mind is still. There's a certain peace in the repetition, in the knowing that the robes will smell of wind and sun, of clean fibers and effort. They will not thank you, but they will wear better next time. They will fold more smoothly, breathe more easily. Your grandmother appears behind you, offering a small bowl of warm barley soup. You take it with both hands and bow slightly before sipping. The warmth spreads through you, instantly chasing away the last coldness from your fingers. She doesn't speak, only sits beside you and watches the robes sway. It is a kind of conversation you've come to treasure, the kind where silence does more than words ever could. Later, once the robes are dry, you begin folding. This is not a rushed job. Each garment is returned to its place with the precision of a formal farewell. Folded by seam, pressed along the natural curve, stacked in careful order, according to season and use. Some are tied with colored cords to indicate their purpose: red for celebration, blue for study, gray for housework. You finish with the inner layers, stacking them last, because they're used first. There's something poetic in that, though you're too tired to find the words. As evening approaches, you light a small stick of incense near the robe chest, not for the garments, but for yourself. A small ritual to mark the end of effort, a moment of scented closure. You watch the smoke rise in lazy spirals, feel it curl around your wrists, and finally step away. You dress in your clean evening robe, the fabric stiff from sun, but soft at the seams, and sit again by the window as the sky deepens into gold. And as the first star appears, you wonder, not for the first time, if this devotion to cloth is strange. But then you remember the comfort of clean sleeves, the dignity of crisp folds, the way a well-kept robe can make you stand a little taller, breathe a little deeper, feel a little more like yourself. Today begins with the rare luxury of time. No guests, no lessons, no urgent errands pulling at your sleeves. The sky is bright but gentle, the kind of morning that feels borrowed, like a page accidentally left unfilled in an otherwise tightly written schedule. You take your time getting up, not out of laziness, but because this quiet deserves ceremony. You reach for your softest robe, the one reserved for household days, with fabric worn so thin it folds like paper between your fingers. It's faded, yes, and the embroidery has long since frayed at the cuffs, but it fits your body like a memory. You tie it loosely and slip your feet into plain cotton slippers, then make your way to the back courtyard where the sun warms the stone in irregular patches. The morning ritual is slow tea, not poured in haste, not sipped between tasks, but brewed leaf by leaf in a small clay pot that breathes as if alive. You watch the steam curl upward as you sit cross-legged on a straw mat, the sleeve of your robe draping over one knee, catching a stray glint of sunlight like it's holding something sacred. You sip, and the warmth travels not just through your throat, but into your fingers, down your spine, until even your toes feel a little more awake. This is not just tea. This is dressing your soul in silence. You decide to spend the morning reorganizing your storage chest. It's a modest wooden box carved with simple patterns of mountain ridges and pine trees, but within it lies a history far more intricate. Every robe, sash, and belt tells a story the crimson festival robe worn once, when the firecrackers startled you into spilling soup. The scholar's coat, with a faint ink mark on the left cuff from the time you tried to write poetry in the wind. The summer linen with grass stains at the hem, evidence of an evening spent chasing lanterns. You unfold each item with reverence, smoothing the fabric, checking the seams, refolding it in perfect thirds before placing it back. The motions are meditative. They remind you of who you were, who you pretended to be, and who you might still become. At the very bottom of the chest, you find something you forgot. You kept a child's robe, tiny and impossibly delicate, pale yellow, with faded rabbits embroidered at the shoulders. It was yours, worn when you could barely walk, passed down from your mother's side, the stitches loose now but still holding. You press it to your face, breathe in the scent of old cedar and faint starch, and wonder how something so small once held your whole world. You set it aside, not to wear, not to display, but simply to remember. After the sorting is done, you bring out your sewing kit. It's nothing elaborate, a small lacquered box with compartments for needles, threads in various shades of blue and red, and a few spare toggles carved from bone. You select a robe with a tear at the hem, small but dangerous if left untended. You thread the needle carefully, knot the end, and begin to stitch. Each pull is slow and firm, guided by both hand and instinct. You remember your grandmother's voice teaching you this skill. The robe protects you. The least you can do is return the favor. You didn't understand it then. You do now. By midday, the house is quiet. The rest of the family is napping or reading, the walls filled with the kind of silence that breathes rather than presses. You slip out to the garden, still in your worn robe, and walk barefoot across the stepping stones. The fabric brushes lightly against your ankles, warmed by the sun, softened by the morning's labor. A butterfly flits past, and you pause to watch it struck by how its wings fold and unfold with such precision. You wonder if, in its own way, even the butterfly is dressed for the day. You spend the afternoon writing, not lessons, not obligations, but your own thoughts, simple reflections inked onto handmade paper. The brush feels more natural now, not a tool of expectation, but of release. Your sleeve still gets in the way, but you let it. Today, it's part of the rhythm. You write about tea, about the feel of cotton worn thin, about the way a single stitch can repair not just a tear in fabric, but in mood. You write until the shadows stretch long across the room, until the ink begins to dry slower, the brush dragging more than gliding. As dusk settles, you light a single lantern. Its glow fills the room with amber warmth, turning even the plain robe you wear into something golden. You sit back, cradling the last of the day's tea, and realize you haven't spoken a word since morning. It doesn't feel lonely. It feels full. Like the silence is stitched with meaning, every moment today wrapped in fabric and care, layered not just on your body, but around your mind. You lie down that night, still in the same robe, too tired and too content to change. It smells faintly of starch, of tea, of the courtyard stones warming in the sun. And just before sleep claims you, You think maybe dressing slowly isn't just about robes. Maybe it's how we should approach everything. The rain arrives just before dawn, not in heavy sheets, but in soft, persistent drizzles that tap lightly against the tiled roof like fingers drumming on silk. You lie still for a while, wrapped in your quilt, listening to the rhythm. The world outside is dim and hushed, as if even the sky has chosen to wear something gray and quiet today. When you finally rise, the air is thick with moisture, and your nightrobe clings slightly to your skin. You move slowly, not out of sleepiness, but because this kind of weather seems to ask for gentleness in everything, steps, words, even thoughts. You open your robe chest and hesitate. Rain days require special consideration. The usual silks are too delicate, too easily stained. The finer cottons take too long to dry. You finally settle on a robe made of oil-treated cloth, dark brown and slightly stiff, with a plain weave that repels water more by stubbornness than magic. It smells faintly of camphor and something earthy, mugwort perhaps, or dried citrus peel from a past season's attempt at herbal preservation. You tie the sash tightly, not for style, but for function, and slip your arms into a short overcoat that has seen better days. It fits awkwardly, but you trust it. It has survived more storms than you have. You step outside under the eaves, watching the water pour in fine lines from the curved tiles. The garden looks different in the rain. Colors soften, outlines blur, and everything seems suspended as if waiting for a cue that never comes. You spot a snail climbing the stone lantern and a single yellow leaf clinging to the branch of the jujube tree like it forgot to fall. The hem of your robe brushes against the damp stone floor, but you don't pull it away. This robe is meant for such contact. It's been soaked, muddied, scrubbed, and line-dried so many times, it no longer complains. Breakfast is eaten standing a hot bowl of millet porridge held close to your chest while the steam fogs your face. No one sits during rain mornings. There's too much to manage. Water needs diverting, leaks need checking, and slippery floors need careful sweeping. You help string an oiled cloth curtain across the kitchen doorway, pinning it tightly at the corners with heavy stones. Your sleeves are rolled high-tied at the elbows with scraps of old ribbon, and for once, no one cares about appearance. Today is about keeping dry, not looking graceful. Later, you're sent to retrieve a delivery from the herbalist's shop 2 lanes over. The streets are slick, the stones glistening like lacquer. You walk, carefully adjusting your steps so the back of your robe doesn't drag through the puddles. The raincoat you wear is made from oiled paper, stitched into wide pleats, and it crackles slightly with each movement. A matching conical hat shields your face, though droplets still manage to find their way under the brim. You pass others similarly dressed shadows under wide hats, navigating the mist with practiced ease. No one talks. Everyone is listening to the rain. At the shop, the herbalist wraps your bundle in waxed paper and ties it with twine. He compliments your rainwear, not the style, but the upkeep. Most people let the paper peel, he says, but yours still shines. You nod politely, secretly pleased. It's a strange sort of pride, but real. In a world where weather often wins, having gear that endures is its own quiet rebellion. On the walk back, you step in a puddle deeper than expected. Water splashes up your leg, dampening your trousers beneath the robe. It's cold and sudden, but you keep walking already, thinking of how you'll dry them not over direct heat, but with cloth and patience layered between towels like steaming dumplings. Once home, you peel off the raincoat, hang it near the fire to air out, and change into a dry house robe. This one is lined with coarse linen, thicker than usual, and smells like salt and cedar. You wear it with socks, those thick cotton ones you rarely use except on days like this. As you settle near the brazier cup of hot water in hand, you marvel at how comforting dry fabric can feel after even a brief encounter with wetness. You spend the rest of the day indoors patching an old sash and re-threading buttons onto a frayed collar. The rhythm is slow, your needlework steady. Despite the gloom outside, the rain continues a constant hush that seems to flatten time. You pause often, not to rest, but to watch the drops slide down the window, tracing crooked lines like forgotten calligraphy. The world is small today, contained within 4 damp walls and layers of fabric. You don't mind. There's warmth here in wool-wrapped ankles and in the way the firelight flickers against the floor tiles. Your robe holds the scent of wood smoke and damp thread, and though the sky remains gray, your mood does not. By nightfall, the rain has lightened to a drizzle, the kind that lingers not because it must, but because it doesn't know how to stop. You sit by the window once more, wrapped tightly cup in hand, and think about how many layers it takes to keep out the weather, not just from your skin, but from your spirit. And you realize that even on days when you barely leave the house, what you wear still matters. Not because anyone sees it, but because you feel it. A robe for the rain is not just armor against water. It's a promise to yourself that you're still here, still dry, still dignified, even when the world forgets the sun. The next morning arrives clear and sharp, as if the rain had washed the world clean overnight. The sky is a bright, polished blue, and the air carries the scent of wet stone and blooming osmanthus. You rise with a sense of renewal stretching slowly under the soft weight of your blanket, and for once, dressing feels like a pleasure rather than a task. You choose a light outer robe today, pale gray with fine blue edging, soft but structured perfect, for a walk to the temple. It's a visiting day, no festival, no grand ceremony, just a quiet offering and a few moments of reflection among incense smoke and carved wood. You dress with care, but without hurry, folding your inner layers smoothly and tying the sash with a knot that sits just right, centered and firm, but not stiff. The sleeves of the robe taper gently, and the fabric has a subtle weight that helps it fall in clean lines around your body. It's not flashy, but it moves beautifully when you walk. Your grandmother joins you near the gate, already dressed in her usual temple attire, a dark purple robe with a high collar and the faint embroidery of lotus flowers near the hem. She walks with the steady grace of someone who has worn these clothes for longer than you've been alive. Her hair is pinned with an old silver clasp shaped like a peony bud, and though her hands are wrinkled, her grip on the cane is firm. She nods toward your robe and says, "You look prepared," which coming from her is both compliment and expectation. Together, you step into the street, your footsteps synchronized more by habit than intention. The path to the temple winds through quiet lanes lined with old walls and fruiting trees. The morning sun filters through the leaves, casting soft shadows that dance across the stones. Your robe catches the light in subtle flashes, the blue trim glowing briefly with each step. A few neighbors pass by offering brief nods and greetings. One remarks on the quality of your fabric, not the cost, but the care with which it's maintained. You thank them both slightly and keep walking, the compliment warming you more than the sun. At the temple gates you pause to tie your sleeves back slightly with a pair of silk cords, keeping them from dragging as you climb the stone steps. Your grandmother does the same more out of tradition than necessity. Inside, the scent of incense is immediate and enveloping, a heavy sweetness that clings to your hair and robes like an invisible blessing. You bow before the altar, careful to let your sleeves fall gracefully as you lower your hands. The movement is automatic, now rehearsed through years of instruction and correction, but it still feels sacred. The weight of the robe grounds you, its fabric cool against your skin, its folds reminding you of every time you've stood in this exact spot, asking for the same things in slightly different words. After placing the incense sticks in their holders, you move to a side chamber where the light is softer, filtered through carved wooden panels. There you sit quietly, knees tucked under your robe, back straight, hands resting in your lap. Around you, the silence is alive, not empty, but filled with rustling cloth, faint footsteps, the distant clink of prayer beads. You close your eyes, breathe deeply, and feel your robe shift slightly with each movement, like it too is taking in the stillness. When your grandmother begins her prayers, you watch her, not out of disrespect, but admiration. The way her robe falls around her, like a second skin, the way she moves without any wasted effort, every fold and pleat perfectly arranged, even in motion. She embodies a kind of dignity that can't be bought or borrowed, only cultivated over time. You wonder if you'll ever wear your clothes like that, not as decoration, but as extension. On the way home, she tells you stories. Not loudly, not all at once, but in snippets between turns in the road. Stories about what she used to wear to temple when she was your age, how she once embroidered a robe for her sister that took 4 seasons to finish, how a single thread once unraveled during a wedding ceremony, and she had to pretend nothing was wrong while silently gripping the sash to keep her dignity intact. You listen carefully, committing each detail to memory, because someday you'll need them, not just for storytelling, but for stitching back the meaning into a loose thread when life inevitably pulls one free. Back at home, you help her remove her robe, folding it slowly and brushing off a few specks of dust with your hand. She does the same for yours, muttering something about temple dust being luckier than any coin. You both laugh, and for a moment, your robes pile on the bench side by side like 2 versions of the same story, told with different inflections. That night, you lay your robe out over a low stool, letting the air carry away the scent of incense. The fabric is still warm where it touched your skin, and a faint crease remains at the bend of each sleeve, shaped by prayer. You don't smooth it out. You leave it there, a quiet reminder that even stillness can leave an impression, and that sometimes the soul dresses through silence more than color. You wake to the sound of someone knocking rhythmically on a wooden block outside the house. It's not urgent, just the neighborhood cobbler making his way down the lane, announcing that he'll be available today for sole repairs and leather patching. It's a familiar sound, one you've grown up with, and somehow it always reminds you of shoes, their weight, their shape, and most of all, their quiet importance in a world obsessed with robes. You sit up and glance down at your own pair, neatly lined along the edge of the bedcloth, uppers, slightly worn soles, softened by years of careful steps. Today, you decide, is a day for walking, and that means dressing from the feet up. You pull on a pair of thick socks, still slightly stiff from yesterday's sun drying, and then reach for your traveling robe. It's a practical thing, slate gray reinforced at the cuffs, with loops at the waist for tying up the hem if the road turns muddy. Not elegant, but well made. You remember helping sew a replacement panel into its back last spring when the fabric tore while climbing a mossy path near the orchard. You tie it securely, fasten the inner sash, and tug gently at the sides to ensure the fabric lies flat across your chest. Then comes the leather belt, a rarity in your usual wardrobe chosen more for function than form. It creaks faintly as you buckle it, and that sound alone makes you feel like you're already halfway to the edge of town. You step into your shoes, thick-soled cloth with patched leather tips, and feel that comforting tightness of a well-worn fit. No ceremony, no embellishment, just quiet utility. But even that has its own grace. You tuck a small handkerchief into your sleeve, sling a light satchel over your shoulder, and step into the daylight where the morning breeze smells of dust and flowering trees. The road out of town is familiar, lined with small stalls just beginning to open. A woman selling steamed buns waves to you. A boy carrying firewood glances at your shoes, then down at his own bare feet, and grins. The walk begins slowly, your steps deliberate, not because the robe demands it, but because you know the path will change. It always does. Cobblestones give way to dirt. Dirt becomes packed clay. Clay becomes a rocky incline that challenges your balance. Your robe rustles with each movement, adjusting to your stride, the hem brushing low but never dragging, tied just high enough to protect it, but loose enough to keep the wind from sneaking in. As you reach the foothills, the air grows cooler, and you tighten your sash instinctively. The robe clings a little at the shoulders with the climb, but it moves well shaped by hundreds of such trips. You stop to rest near a clump of bamboo and sip from a small gourd flask tucked into your bag. The cloth of your sleeve absorbs a few drops as you lower it, but you don't mind. That's what this robe is for, taking the dust, the sweat, the minor accidents, so your body can focus on being present. At the summit, the town looks small behind your rooftops, a patchwork of gray tile and clay. You sit on a flat stone, letting your robe fan out around you, and for a while you say nothing. There's no one to hear anyway, only birds and breeze and the occasional creak of bamboo bending against itself. You close your eyes, letting your hand rest on the belt at your waist, and feel the slight imprint it's left on your skin. A mark of movement, a mark of having gone somewhere that morning instead of staying inside and folding linen. The descent is trickier. The path is narrower, the stones looser, and you're more tired than you expected. At one point, you slip slightly, and the edge of your robe catches on a low branch. It snags tears with a sound like paper ripping, and you freeze, not from pain. It's a shallow tear, but from the knowledge that you'll need to patch it later. You touch the spot gently and nod to yourself. Another memory stitched into fabric. Another reason this robe will outlive its wearers. Back in town, you stop by the cobbler's stall. He's seated cross-legged, sharpening an awl. When he sees the scrape on your left shoe, he smiles and says, "You climbed again, didn't you?" You nod. He reaches out, examines the leather, and starts speaking about soles, stitching, and how road dirt always finds the same place to wear through. While he works, you sit quietly, robe slightly damp, with effort collar loosened just enough to breathe. You feel the sun drying your sleeves, warming the fabric from the outside in. When you finally return home, you unbuckle the belt and hang the robe in a quiet corner near the window. It's wrinkled, slightly stained, and marked with the day, but somehow more beautiful than when it was pressed. You run your hand down the front and think about how few people ever see robes like this in their best form, creased, stretched, shaped by landscape. And maybe that's the real purpose of such clothes, not to impress in stillness, but to carry motion gracefully. You're woken not by sounds or light, but by a sensation, an itch along your collarbone, subtle at first, then persistent. When you sit up and scratch it, your fingers find the culprit, a tiny seed pod tucked inside the fold of your robe, probably from yesterday's climb. It's hard-curled like a question mark and somehow managed to travel home with you unnoticed. You flick it away gently and run your hands down the front of your robe. It's still creased from yesterday, the fabric holding the memory of movement, the faint scent of hillside air lingering in the weave. Normally, this would be laundry day again, but today is different. Today, you'll be helping your aunt in the dye workshop, and that means another kind of robe entirely. You rise and select an old tunic kept specifically for dye work, something coarse and stained with a high collar and sleeves already darkened from years of contact with indigo madder root and walnut husks. The color no longer has a name. It's somewhere between brown and gray with faint streaks of green where chlorophyll once left its mark. You tie it snug at the waist, double knot the belt, and roll up the sleeves before securing them with 2 braided cords. These aren't decorative, they're tools, functional, slightly frayed, smelling faintly of dye and steam. On your feet, you wear wooden sandals, the kind with just enough elevation to keep your soles dry when the floor gets wet. The dye shed is warm, even in the early morning, its roof low, the walls dark with years of pigment and fire smoke. Your aunt stands by the boiling vat, stirring with a long wooden pole that looks more like a shepherd's staff than a tool. Her own robe is identical to yours, though more deeply stained, and she greets you with a nod that says, "You're late, even though you're not." Together, you begin laying out the fabric bolts of raw cotton, stretched on bamboo frames pre-washed and patted down with rice paste to resist uneven soaking. You work silently, hands moving in familiar patterns, bodies avoiding each other in the tight space like dancers in a practiced routine. When it's time to begin, your aunt lowers the first panel into the vat. The steam rises instantly, curling around your face, clinging to your hair. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in the water, distorted, shadowed by movement, your face framed by sleeves that now look darker with dampness. The robe, though plain, begins to feel like armor, not stiff, not grand, but protective. A shield against the splashes, the stains, the intense smell of fermented dye that clings to everything it touches. As the fabric absorbs the pigment, it changes slowly at first, then dramatically, once lifted into the air. Indigo especially is a magic trick of chemistry. It enters the vat green, emerges yellowish, and darkens into blue before your eyes when exposed to the air. You hold one end of the cloth as your aunt wrings it out, the dye dripping like ink from a freshly written character splattering the floor in abstract constellations. Your hands are soon stained, and so is your robe, though the new marks barely show against the older ones. You like it this way, a robe that reveals its work without apology. Later, while the cloth dries on racks in the courtyard, you help clean the tools. You scrub brushes, rinse the dye ladles, and hang the cords to dry beside the sandals. The robe clings to your back, now damp from effort and steam, and you peel it away from your skin as you stretch. Your aunt, sitting with her bowl of tea, glances at your sleeves and says, "You'll never get that new stain out." You shrug and answer, "Then I won't try." She smirks as if you've finally said something wise. In the afternoon, you take a bundle of newly dyed cloth to the weaver's house. The robe you're wearing smells strong, metallic, earthy, slightly sour from the fermentation process. But it no longer bothers you. It's the smell of something being made, of effort transformed into color. The weaver examines the fabric, nods, and invites you inside for a quick cup of tea. You sit awkwardly on a stool too low for your height, and as you shift your robe, gathers at your waist, creasing in a way that reminds you of river stones. Soft angles, worn edges, lines, shaped not by design, but by use. When you return home at sunset, the robe is heavy with the day. You remove it slowly, fold it once, not neatly, just respectfully, and place it over the frame near the hearth to dry. It no longer looks like clothing. It looks like memory, like something that holds the heat of labor and the scent of wood smoke and the weight of silent collaboration. You change into something clean, soft, and light, and sit on the porch, watching the dye shed grow dim in the fading light. You think about how most people only see the finished fabric, the robe, the sash, the elegant trim, but never the dye-stained hands or the cloudy water that made it. And yet, without this robe, stained and ugly to some, there would be no beauty in the final form. You sip your tea, lift your sleeve to smell it again, and find beneath the scent of indigo the faintest trace of osmanthus. A reminder that even in mess, something delicate survives. You begin the day with a task that requires more than careful hands. It requires diplomacy. Your cousin is getting married soon, and today you're accompanying your mother to the home of the bride's family to discuss ceremonial garments. It's not a formal negotiation, but it's close enough that every gesture, every word, every fold in your sleeve will be noticed. That means dressing with more than intention. It means dressing with fluency. You choose a robe in muted gold with a faint vine pattern woven into the fabric, subtle enough not to appear boastful, but fine enough to suggest thoughtfulness. The inner collar is trimmed in pale jade green, just enough contrast to signal seasonal awareness. And you tie the sash in a knot. Your mother once showed you that sits lower on the waist than usual, more relaxed, more approachable. Your mother, of course, is dressed in a robe of deep russet with wide sleeves and a matching scarf embroidered with cranes. She inspects you with a single raised brow, then adjusts the tilt of your shoulder seam without a word. You understand the message good, but not perfect. You fix the right sleeve yourself, hiding your nervous exhale behind a practiced smile. As you step into your shoes and fasten the lacquered buttons of your traveling jacket, you remember what your grandmother once said, "When words fail, your robe speaks for you." So today, yours will need to be eloquent. The bride's house is a short walk through narrow streets, where the walls lean slightly old bricks warm in the morning sun. You pass neighbors sweeping their stoops, children playing with string puzzles, and one elderly man who pauses to compliment your mother's scarf with a bow so deep it borders on theatrical. At the bride's gate, you bow just enough to show respect, but not so much that your collar crumples. These are things you practice without mirrors. The feel of angles, the fall of fabric, the choreography of courtesy. Inside, the family greets you in a sitting room bright with late-season chrysanthemums and soft yellow light. The bride's mother is wearing a plum-colored robe with elaborate cuff embroidery. Her smile is pleasant, but her eyes are precise. You bow again, lower this time. Your sleeves align just right to catch the light without flaring. Your mother begins the conversation with polite pleasantries, easing into the purpose of your visit like tea poured into a shallow cup, slowly, without ripples. Then come the garments. They're brought out one by one, the bridal robe red with gold phoenixes, the groom's formal outfit in navy and silver, the shared ceremonial scarves, one long enough to drape around both their shoulders as a symbol of union. Each piece is unfolded and discussed with the reverence of religious texts. You help lay them out, your fingers careful not to crease the fabric, your movements smooth, restrained. You're not here to dominate the conversation, but you are expected to notice every detail. A misplaced buttonhole, a loose stitch, a color slightly too bright. All of it speaks, and you are listening. At one point, a disagreement arises over the sash to be worn during the tea ceremony. One elder believes it should be embroidered with peonies, a flower of wealth and honor. Another insists on plum blossoms for resilience and modesty. You stay quiet, as is proper, until your mother gives you a glance. It's subtle, but clear speak, but wisely. You suggest gently that perhaps the sash could bear a hidden lining of one and an outer weave of the other, an elegant compromise. The room stills. Then someone nods. Another smiles. Your mother doesn't look at you, but her next sentence has a slightly warmer tone. You've passed. After the discussion, tea is served. You drink carefully, lifting the cup with both hands, sleeves tucked in so they don't dip into the saucer. The bride herself enters at last, shy but graceful, her robe a pale rose color with no embroidery, yet a blank canvas. You bow to her, and for a moment you see the weight she's carrying. Not just the new role, but the layers of expectation sewn into every inch of what she will wear on her wedding day. You wonder how heavy the bridal robe is. You wonder if it feels like joy or like armor. The visit ends with smiles and bows, and a few gentle adjustments to the embroidery plan. As you leave, the bride's mother presses a small box into your hand. "A thank you," she says. Inside is a handkerchief embroidered with tiny magnolias. The stitching is perfect. You fold it carefully, tuck it into your sleeve, and step outside the sun, now higher and warmer. Your robe slightly rumpled from sitting too long, but still dignified in its creases. On the way home, your mother finally speaks. "You handled it well," she says, then adds, "but next time, smooth your back pleat before sitting." It tugged slightly. You nod, hiding a smile. That's high praise coming from her. You walk the rest of the way in silence, your robe moving with each step like a flag of quiet achievement. Back at home, you hang the robe to air and place the handkerchief in your drawer, not with the others, but in the corner, reserved for things that remind you how much you've learned and how far you still have to go. Then you sit down, pour yourself a fresh cup of tea, and look at your reflection in the surface. You don't look different, but you are. And the robe you wore today, it knows. Today is market day, and that means chaos. Beautiful, dusty, overwhelming chaos. You wake early not out of duty, but out of anticipation, already hearing the distant clatter of wheels and the calls of vendors echoing through the alleys like birdsong layered over argument. Dressing for the market is a careful calculation. You need freedom to move away to carry coins, and most importantly, a robe that can withstand being jostled without looking like it's been jostled. You choose a sturdy dark blue outer robe with small reinforced panels at the elbows, a sash with deep pockets sewn into the lining, and an older pair of cloth shoes that no longer mind being stepped on. The robe is plain but neat, and the sash wraps twice around your waist, knotted at the front in a way that lets you tuck a coin pouch inside without it bulging too obviously. By the time you reach the marketplace, the street is already alive with movement. Stalls burst open like flowers, red umbrellas, bamboo crates, steaming baskets of buns, bolts of fabric hanging like banners in the wind. The smells hit you first: ginger and sesame oil, grilled fish ink from fresh calligraphy scrolls, dust kicked up by eager feet. Your robe sways with your stride as you weave through the crowd, sleeves kept tight to your sides so they don't catch on hanging lanterns or trailing ribbons. You nod to the peanut vendor, wave to the fishmonger's daughter, and stop to admire a rack of embroidered slippers with patterns so fine they look like painted silk. You don't need new slippers, but you run your fingers across them anyway, appreciating the stitching, the evenness, the way they hold their shape, as if proud to be worn. As you continue, you hear a shout, someone arguing over the price of persimmons, and then a loud sneeze from a boy trying to balance a stack of ceramic bowls. A gust of wind lifts the edge of your robe just enough to show your inner layer, a flash of patterned cotton that you'd forgotten even had a design. A woman passing by notices and smiles at the detail. You adjust your sash slightly, half embarrassed, half pleased, then move on toward the fabric vendors at the far end of the street. Here, things slow down. You're no longer walking, you're browsing, and that means posture, attention, and the ability to appear both discerning and open to suggestion. You run your hand across bolts of raw silk, hold them to the light, squint at the weave. The vendor, a man with a silver tooth and a robe that's seen better days, starts explaining the origins of the dye indigo, from the southern provinces, safflower for red walnut, husk for brown. You nod along, not because you need the information, but because listening well is its own kind of currency in these transactions. Eventually, you settle on a bolt of pale green silk, just enough to make a summer robe. You negotiate the price gently, hands tucked into your sleeves, shoulders relaxed. Your robe helps you hear. It says you are not new to this. It says you know the difference between showy silk and something that will still hold its shape after the 10th washing. The vendor wraps the fabric, carefully ties it with twine, and places it into your hands with a grin. You bow in thanks, tuck it beneath your arm, and step back into the current of the crowd. On the way home, the weight of the silk shifts slightly with each step, pressing against your side, through your robe. You feel it not heavy, but present like a promise, waiting to be fulfilled. Back at the house, you lay it flat on the table, smoothing it out as your mother leans over to examine it. She lifts a corner, holds it to the light, and gives a brief, approving hum. "Good eye," she says, and you feel your shoulders rise a little taller. She leaves you to fold it, and as you do, you realize how many decisions live in this fabric. The choice of thread, the hand that wove it, the foot that walked through the market to find it. Later that evening, you wear the same robe to dinner, dusted off and slightly creased, but still dignified. Your uncle notices a small splash of soy sauce on the left sleeve and shakes his head. You grin and tell him it was the price of a perfect dumpling. He laughs, wipes it with a corner of his sleeve, and mutters something about how real stories are told in stains. After the meal, you return to your room and hang the robe near the window, letting the cool night air carry away the scent of oil and smoke. It flutters lightly still, holding the warmth of the day, and you sit beside it with a quiet sense of satisfaction. You think about how the robe you wore today had to be many things: practical, respectable, flexible, even persuasive. It had to carry coins, conceal nervous hands, show enough personality to make a vendor smile, but not so much as to make a tailor suspicious. And it did. It did all of that without complaint, without drawing attention to itself. You run your fingers down the seam and wonder what it would say if it could speak. Probably something like, "You owe me a better hanger." You smile, fold it carefully, and promise tomorrow's robe will have an easier job. It's the 7th day of the 7th month, and that means Qixi, the festival of lovers, weavers, and hopeless romantic gestures wrapped in moonlight and silk threads. Though you're not in love, not exactly the day carries a certain charge, like the air itself is stitched with possibility. Dressing for Qixi is different from festival robes or temple garments. It requires softness, suggestion, and a touch of careful disarray. You choose a robe in faded lavender, the fabric light and barely structured with a lining of pale ivory that peeks through just enough to feel intentional. The sleeves are long and loose, the sash a simple knot of deep gray cotton that holds more gently than firmly. You smooth the front, once leave the collar slightly open, and pull your hair back into a low knot, without a pin, letting it fall just uneven enough to seem natural. The streets by early evening are already filling with lanterns suspended between rooftops like glowing fruit ready to be picked. Small paper boats with candles drift along the canal carrying tiny notes written in hurried brushstrokes. You walk slowly your robe, whispering with every step, the fabric catching the occasional breeze and brushing lightly against your ankles. Everyone is dressed in their finest, some in crimson robes embroidered with gold thread, others in pale pastels meant to glow under lantern light. And yet, it's not about status today. It's about presence. The way the robe flows as you turn your head, the way your sleeve falls across your lap as you write a wish and send it downstream. You stop at a vendor selling silver thread and delicate charms, tiny bells shaped like swallows, miniature fans carved from sandalwood embroidered patches meant to be sewn into the inner lining of a robe visible only to the wearer. You pick up a small silk knot shaped like a peach blossom. It's the same shade as your robe, almost indistinguishable, and you buy it without bargaining. You slip it into your sleeve and continue walking, letting your thoughts drift toward the bridge where couples gather to whisper things that might never be said in daylight. At the bridge you stand to the side, watching the water reflect the lanterns above. You don't join the couples, not tonight, but you do sit and write a poem. Just a short one on a scrap of paper that smells faintly of plum ink. You fold it carefully, weigh it down with a pebble, and set it afloat with the others. Your sleeve dips slightly as you do, darkening where the silk touches the water, and you pull it back slowly, watching the moisture creep upward like a secret making its way into the weave. A breeze passes, and your robe responds immediately. It lifts and shifts the sleeves, drawing in closer to your body, the collar brushing your jawline. You wonder, not for the first time, whether clothing can feel things, whether this robe knows that it's part of something momentarily beautiful, whether it too remembers being dyed, stitched, ironed, and now worn to witness lanterns blooming in the dark. As night deepens, you walk home through narrow streets made golden by torchlight. A group of children chases a floating lantern, giggling until it disappears over a rooftop. You smile, holding your robe close, with one hand, the other, still carrying the charm from earlier. Back at your door, you untie the sash, slowly letting the robe fall open just enough to breathe. You hang it by the window, not folded, not hidden, but draped as it is creased, perfumed with smoke and night air, one sleeve still slightly damp from the canal. Before bed, you sew the charm into the inside hem of the robe, just one quick loop of thread to hold it in place. It's not meant to be seen, but you'll know it's there. The next time you wear it, you'll feel the weight of the knot against your shin, like a quiet reminder of a poem floating somewhere unread but not forgotten. And maybe that's what Chikshi is really, for not declarations, but traces. Not grand gestures, but the small stitched things you carry into tomorrow without anyone else knowing. The day after, Chikshi feels quieter than it should. The lanterns have been taken down their strings, coiled neatly, and stored in cedar boxes. The stalls that sold sweets and charms are gone, leaving only faint outlines on the ground where feet once shuffled in slow procession. You wake to this stillness rubbing sleep from your eyes, the robe from last night still hanging by the window like a faded echo of celebration. It smells of incense and canal water, a little sweet, a little damp, and completely unfit for today's purpose, an afternoon spent assisting the local physician on his monthly household rounds. This means dressing plainly, but not poorly. You select a robe of dark tan cotton, durable and forgiving, with sleeves that can be rolled without losing shape, and a belt fitted with a loop for carrying a pouch of herbal cloths and small vials. You dress quickly, but with the kind of intention that comes from habit, every tie and fold exactly where it needs to be, not to impress, but to stay out of the way. The physician is already waiting at the gate, his own robe, a dull gray-blue stained with traces of dried roots and oil. You bow slightly, he returns it with a brisk nod, and the two of you begin walking. He's not much for small talk, preferring the rhythm of shoes against dirt paths and the soft clink of bottles in his satchel to any unnecessary chatter. You match his pace robe, swishing gently at your calves, the hem occasionally lifting with the breeze to reveal a glimpse of your undersash, faded from washing, but still intact. The homes you visit are modest stone walls, bamboo roofs, simple courtyards, and in each your job is the same: boil water, lay out cloth. Clean tools hand him what he needs before he even has to ask. Your robe begins to absorb the day almost immediately, catching a fleck of crushed ginger here, a puff of powdered root there, a damp spot on the left sleeve from kneeling beside a water basin that wasn't quite emptied. By mid-afternoon, you're both tired. The last house has a steep stairway and a grandmother who insists on preparing tea before anything else happens. You sit on a wooden stool near the hearthrug, damp with sweat at the back hair stuck slightly to your neck. The tea arrives bitter and steaming, and you sip slowly, feeling the warmth creep down your chest through the fabric, softening the stiffness that's built since morning. The physician says nothing, only adjusts his robe to cover a tear near the hem. You watch the motion precise and casual and realize how second nature it becomes, this constant negotiation with cloth. Pulling it back, smoothing it forward, making space for your body without ever quite relaxing. Back on the road, he finally speaks. Most people think healing is about medicine, he says, eyes ahead. It's about attention and knowing when to stay quiet. You nod, unsure whether he's talking about the sick or you or both. Your robe feels heavier now, not with dirt, but with the accumulated quiet of every room you've entered today, every moment of standing still while someone coughed or winced or tried to hide their pain. It's strange how the fabric seems to hold that, like it absorbs more than just heat and dust. It absorbs mood, presence, memory. When you return home, you undress carefully. The robe goes straight into the washing basket, but before you drop it in, you pause. There's a small smudge of something, possibly crushed jujube, or a smear of powdered bark on the inner edge of the left sleeve. You run your finger over it, and for a moment, you hesitate. Then instead of washing it right away, you fold it and set it aside, not to keep the stain, but to acknowledge it. A mark not of clumsiness, but of having been useful. A trace of care. That evening, you wear something looser, a faded linen robe, with sleeves so soft they fall like curtain folds around your wrists. You sit in the courtyard, under the faint stars, the air cooler. Now the weight of the day finally lifting from your shoulders. You breathe deeply, arms folded into the fabric, not because you're cold, but because the robe feels like a blanket wrapped in silence. You think about the physician's words about attention and realize that your robe today did more than dress you. It participated. It knelt. It stretched it. Soaked it, carried. And now resting it seems to breathe with you. It's laundry day again, but this time it isn't yours. Today, you're helping your uncle prepare his ceremonial garments for an upcoming memorial rite. And unlike the easy rhythm of washing your own robes, this task feels heavier not just because of the fabric, but because of what it carries. You start by pulling the bundle from the cedar chest in the main hall, untying the red string that holds it closed. The cloth within is wrapped in layers, linen, then paper, then silk, each fold a gesture of respect, each layer holding in more than scent and color. The outer robe is deep charcoal, almost black, and embroidered with subtle lines of silver thread along the sleeves and collar. It's a mourning garment worn only for rituals that recall names spoken in the past tense, and even your breath quiets as you unfold it fully onto the table. You work in silence, brushing the robe gently with a soft cloth dipped in rice water, careful not to wet it too much. The fabric is thick but delicate, like something strong that has chosen to appear fragile. As you clean, you notice signs of age, tiny pulls in the stitching, the way one sleeve droops slightly more than the other, the faint fading along the hem from a sun that no longer remembers why it was shining that day. You hold the collar in both hands and feel its weight, not just of thread and dye, but of memory. This robe has been worn to say goodbye more times than you've said hello. Your uncle sits nearby, repairing the tassels of a ceremonial hat, his hands moving slowly, deliberately, with a reverence that tells you this isn't routine, even if he's done it dozens of times. Occasionally, he glances at your progress, not to judge, but to remind you that care is part of the ritual. You finish brushing the robe, fold it loosely, and place it under a clean cotton cloth weighted down by polished stones, letting gravity do the pressing. While you wait, you begin preparing the inner layers, a white underrobe, crisp and starchy, with a collar so high it nearly brushes the jawline when worn. It smells faintly of camphor and soap, and as you iron the seams flat with a warm stone, you wonder how many such garments sit folded in silence until they are called upon to stand beside incense and bowed heads. Later, your uncle rises and begins to dress. You help him first with the inner robe, holding it open as he steps in, smoothing the back seam with one hand and folding the sides in the correct order, right under left. Then the sash, then the outer robe, heavy and thick, draped over his shoulders like history returning to be worn. You tie the belt, slowly adjusting its tension so it sits firmly, but not harshly. Then you help him into the overcoat, which buttons at the side with carved wooden toggles that creak faintly as you fasten them. When it's done, he stands still, eyes closed, robe draped like shadow around him, and for a moment you don't see your uncle. You see something older, something sacred. He nods once, signaling that it's right, and you step back as he turns to gather the incense box and ancestral tablets. He doesn't speak as he leaves, and neither do you. Words would only crumple the silence his robe has created. After he's gone, you sit by the window with the leftover cloth refolding scraps and smoothing ribbons, thinking about how clothing can become more than a tool. This robe didn't just prepare your uncle for a ritual, it transformed him, not into someone else, but into a version of himself that can stand in front of memory and be still. It made space around him, softened his breath, changed the way the light hit his shoulders, and you begin to realize that some robes don't exist for everyday movement or casual conversation. Some exist only for moments when language isn't enough. You touch the empty sash left on the table and wonder how many times it's been tied in silence, how many times a robe like this has caught the scent of burning paper or absorbed a tear someone pretended not to shed. These garments aren't worn for comfort or fashion or even beauty. They are worn to carry grief with grace. That night, you light a small stick of incense for no reason at all, or maybe for every reason at once. You sit by your own robe, a simpler one, the kind that folds easily and wrinkles without consequence, and you place your hand on its sleeve, not to straighten it, but just to feel it. You're not mourning anyone today. But you understand now why we keep these robes ready. Not because we expect to use them, but because one day we must. And when that day comes, we will need clothing that can hold the weight of what we cannot say. The morning after the memorial is slow and hushed, as if the house itself is catching its breath. No one speaks loudly. Slippers scuff against the floor with more caution than usual, and even the birds outside the window seem to chirp more softly, as if they too understand that something solemn still lingers in the corners of the rooms. You wake with a robe already in mind, not for mourning, but not quite for everyday life either. It's a quiet robe, a faded sea gray with a high collar and sleeves just a little longer than usual, made from linen, so well worn that it folds like memory. You slip into it without ceremony, tying the sash low and loose, leaving the collar half open to let the morning air rest against your skin. You head to the garden, not for work or purpose, but to breathe. The stones are still wet from the night dew, and your robe gathers a little moisture at the hem, but you let it. There's something cleansing in that the way cloth absorbs the world without complaint. You sit under the persimmon tree back, straight legs crossed your sleeves, resting gently in your lap, and for a long time you do nothing but watch the breeze play with the grass. You think about the robe your uncle wore yesterday, now folded, stored again, still carrying the scent of incense and smoke. You think about how yours feels today, light, quiet, undemanding, and you wonder if robes, like people, carry moods that outlast the hours they're worn. Eventually, your cousin joins you, bringing a pot of chrysanthemum tea and 2 small cups. She's in a robe of soft apricot, simple but elegant, the fabric bunched slightly at one shoulder where she tied it in haste. She notices your gaze, smiles, and smooths it down with a single motion. "I didn't sleep much," she says, and pours the tea. You nod, taking your cup with both hands, your sleeve brushing the rim just lightly enough to leave a trace of warmth on the cloth. The two of you sit in silence for a while, sipping, exhaling. No one brings up yesterday. There's no need. The robes say enough. Later, back inside, you begin preparing the household linens for storage. It's a mundane task, folding, dusting, stacking, but today it feels almost ceremonial. You handle each piece like it belonged to someone else, laying it out flat, checking for tears or loose threads, smoothing the edges with a palm, and refolding it into thirds. The motion becomes rhythmic, soothing. Your robe shifts gently around your knees as you move, never clinging, never binding, like it's helping you carry the quiet rather than interrupting it. At one point, a loose thread on your own cuff snags against a table corner, and you pause, fingers gently tugging it free before tucking it back under the seam. You'll mend it later, but for now, you let it be a small imperfection, resting without shame. In the afternoon, a neighbor stops by with rice cakes wrapped in banana leaves, a quiet offering in lieu of conversation. You bow in thanks, robe sleeves rising slightly with emotion, and set the bundle down on the kitchen table without unwrapping it. The scent seeps through anyway, sweet, earthy, soft, and fills the room like a memory you didn't expect to arrive. You sit for a moment, one hand on your cup, the other resting on your lap, and let the weight of the day settle into the folds of your clothing. There's no rush. There's nothing urgent to do. Just small motions, small sounds, and a robe that has learned how to hold space. That evening, you change into a looser night robe, this one lighter, barely more than a layer between you and the dimming air. You hang the sea-gray robe by the window, where it catches the last light of the day, glowing faintly with creases that feel earned. It doesn't smell like incense or sweat or the sharp salt of tears. It smells like tea and wood and the faint coolness of morning. You run your hand along the collar once before stepping away, not to straighten it, but simply to acknowledge that today it carried you gently. And as you settle into bed, the blanket light on your chest, you think not of the ceremony, not even of the sorrow, but of how kindness can live in fabric. How some robes don't need to impress or protect or shape the world around you. Some just need to be there, worn in silence, soft at the seams, ready to hold whatever quiet the day gives you. You wake before the sun today not because you must, but because your body insists. The world outside is still wrapped in that deep indigo hush that only exists before dawn. The house is asleep, but you move with purpose, quietly folding your blanket, washing your face with water so cold it feels like a reminder to be alive. Today is market day, and although you aren't there to buy anything special, there's a satisfaction in preparing for it properly. You choose a robe dyed with plant ash and tea bark, an unremarkable gray-brown soft. From countless washings, with a sash that's been retied so many times, it knows exactly where it wants to sit. The fabric is thin enough to layer, but sturdy enough to face the tug of baskets and the occasional nudge from someone eager to reach the plum cellar first. Outside, the ground is still damp from the night. Your footsteps are muffled by the early fog, and the robe brushes against your calves as you walk, carrying dew and dust in equal measure. At the market, the stalls are still being raised, wooden beams clacking into place, bolts of cloth rolled out like rivers, waiting for someone to wade through. You lend a hand where needed, not because it's expected, but because your robe is humble and loose, meant for moving without restriction. A vendor hands you a woven basket and a crooked grin, and you begin making your way down the rows. There's something meditative about the way your robe catches the morning breeze, lifting slightly at the hem every time you pause to inspect a bundle of leeks or sniff a pile of dried tangerine peel. The sleeves flap softly when you hand over coins, and sometimes you push them up just enough to keep them from brushing against sticky fish scales or sweet rice dough. Other shoppers are dressed in finer robes, silks embroidered with cloud motifs or deep reds that glow in the sun, but yours does its job silently, without needing to be admired. It is a robe that listens, not one that speaks. Midway through the morning, you stop by the calligrapher's stall. He's old bent slightly with time, but his eyes are still sharp. You ask for paper and ink, and he hands them over with a nod, commenting on your robe's worn cuffs with the affection one might give an old friend. Reliable, he says, and that's the highest praise he gives anything. You write a short poem there on the spot sleeve's tucked back brush, steady in your grip. The robe doesn't tug or bunch or distract it, simply lets you be still. Later, you sit by the canal to eat a small rice bun, watching the crowd thicken and the voices rise. Your robe has picked up scents along the way, fried tofu, orange peel, tobacco smoke from the man selling incense. You don't mind. It's part of the memory now. As the sun climbs higher, you fold your sleeves inward and tie a second knot in your sash to keep it from loosening in the heat. A child runs past and nearly knocks over your basket. You catch it, robe flaring slightly as you move, then settle back down as though nothing happened. That's the kind of garment. This is one that moves with you and forgets the commotion immediately after. Back home, you hang it up not out of reverence, but respect. You smooth the fabric over the shoulder, checking for dirt or small rips, and smile when you see none. It has served its purpose without protest. Later tonight, it will be washed and folded, ready to be called upon again for another quiet duty. Not glamorous, not ceremonial, but steady. And as you change into an indoor robe, thin cotton, pale green, perfect for resting, you glance once more at the ash-brown robe hanging by the door. It has no name, no story stitched into its lining, no visible mark of status, but it knows you. It has held your elbows during bargaining, cradled your back, while you knelt for onions fluttered softly when the wind came in from the river. That's more than enough. The sound of bells reaches your window before you even open your eyes. Not loud, not frantic, just the light rhythmic chime of small metal ornaments swinging from a wooden cart. You know what it means. The traveling fabric dyer has returned to town. He only visits twice a season, and if you want your robe dyed before festival time, today is the day. You rise quickly, but without panic. There's a kind of calm urgency to days like this, where every step has meaning and every fold matters. You reach for your old robe, the one you've set aside precisely for this task. It's colorless in a kind way, not quite gray, not quite brown, just faded by time and use. There's a faint patch along the side where the seam was reinforced with thread from a different garment, and you like it more because of that. It's a robe that doesn't apologize for what it's become. Outside, the morning air smells faintly of wet wood and coal ash. The dyer's cart is already surrounded by a small crowd, everyone carrying cloth to be transformed bolts of raw silk cotton. Undershirts, handkerchiefs, stained with months of sun and sweat. You step quietly into the group robe, wrapped tightly around you, carrying a small bundle tied in linen. It's a summer robe, lightweight and wide-sleeved one you've worn through festivals and idle afternoons. It's pale blue now, almost white at the shoulders, from too much time under the sun, and you want it to become something darker. Not to hide its history, but to change its mood. As the dyer unfolds, he runs his fingers over the fabric, nods, and asks what color you want. You hesitate, then say, "Mulberry?" He smiles, pleased by the choice. Deep, rich, not showy. A color that knows how to stay quiet. While you wait for your turn, you sit on a bench nearby, your everyday robe pooling around your ankles like an old dog resting at your feet. A woman beside you has brought 3 scarves each from a different stage of her life. One from her wedding, one from her son's birth, and one that belonged to her grandmother. She tells you she's having them dyed the same color so they can be sewn into a single sash. "I want to carry all of us at once," she says, almost like an afterthought. You nod, unsure what to say, but you glance down at your own robe, wondering what stories it's been soaking in while you weren't paying attention. When your robe is ready, it's still damp and smells sharply of crushed bark and vinegar. You're told not to wear it for at least 2 days. Let it dry. Let the color set. Let the fibers remember their new shape. You carry it home, carefully wrapped in fresh muslin, and lay it flat by the window, letting the sun and wind do their quiet work. In the meantime, you decide to clean your wardrobe. It's not something you do often, but today feels like a good day to take stock. You pull out every robe you own, laying them across the bed, each one folded with its own logic. Some with sharp military corners, others softer shaped by how you pull them from the line when they're not fully dry. There's one you forgot you still had, a heavy winter robe with deep green cuffs lined with rabbit fur so soft it still makes you pause when you touch it. You wore it during last year's cold snap, when the well froze solid and you had to break the surface with a wooden pole just to wash your face. That robe kept you warm, and you tucked it away so thoroughly in spring that it became a buried memory. Each garment holds its own weather. The linen one smells like dust and salt from that time you walked all the way to the coast. Another still carries a faint scent of camphor and citrus from when you stored it too close to the herbal pantry. You smooth them all, stacking by weight, not color summer to winter, light to heavy. And all the while your new mulberry robe rests by the window, deepening in shade with every hour. Later in the afternoon, you decide to iron a few of the robes with a warm brick wrapped in cloth. You press down slowly, evenly, letting the weight glide over each fold, each sleeve, each pleat. There's no rush. No one is coming. But it feels right to offer care to the robes that have carried you, one sleeve at a time. The wrinkles fall away, replaced by smooth silence. You pause occasionally to sip tea, careful not to spill. Even now you place the cup far from the edge of the table because a single stain could change a robe's entire story. You think of the mulberry robe drying in the light, and you wonder what moments it will soon be asked to carry, what steps it will wrap around, what conversations it will overhear, what scents will cling to its lining like unspoken thoughts. Evening comes gently soft, gold light, creeping across the floor and into the folds of the fabric you've so carefully tended. You rehang the robes one by one, spacing them with care, so each has enough room to breathe. The wardrobe closes with a soft click like a bow at the end of a ceremony. You check on the dyed robe one last time, and though it's still damp, the color has settled beautifully, a rich velvety mulberry that looks different depending on how the light touches it. You smile not out of pride, but satisfaction, like something old has remembered how to be new again. As night falls, you return to your room, change into your sleeping robe, thin pale, with sleeves so long they sometimes brush the floor and sit by the window with a small oil lamp. The house is quiet, save for the soft rustle of moth wings against the screen. You write a few lines in your notebook, nothing profound, just a thought. Some days clothing feels more like memory than fabric. You don't know why that feels important, but it does. Maybe because robes never argue, never forget your shape, never rush you into being someone you're not. They wait, they wrap, they carry. And in a world that often moves too quickly, that's a kind of grace worth noticing. The first chill of autumn sneaks into your sleeves before you even realize the season has changed. It doesn't announce itself with wind or storm, just a subtle shift in the way the air feels against your skin. Cooler, drier, more serious. You pause halfway through your morning tea to notice that your wrist, once warmed by steam, is now comfortably cool. That's your cue. You rise and head to the cedar chest in the corner of your room where the heavier robes have been waiting patiently. The lid creaks softly as you open it, releasing a small cloud of camphor-scented air that smells like dust and safety. You run your hand over the folded garments inside the fabric, thicker than what you've worn all summer, colors, darker textures, denser, as if each robe has spent the last season quietly storing warmth for this very moment. You select a robe of dark plum wool, a little stiff from disuse, but still proud. It has a high collar, lined in silk, and sleeves wide enough to double as hand warmers if folded inward. The inside is lined with brushed cotton soft as down, and when you slip it on, it feels like returning to a favorite corner of an old book. You tie the sash tightly, not because you need the support, but because the snugness tells your body that it's protected. Outside, the trees have begun to change, not all at once, but here and there, a yellow tip, a red fringe, a leaf, already crisp underfoot. Your new season's robe sways slightly as you step into the garden, its hem brushing the tops of the dry grass, whispering secrets to the ground with every stride. Today's task is simple. Gather fallen leaves for compost and maybe cut back the bitter melon vines now that they've withered. It's work that doesn't ask much of your mind, leaving room for your robe to take center stage in your awareness. It shifts with you as you reach and bend, never constricting, never clinging. The sleeves flap gently when you shake out a woven basket, And when the wind rises slightly, your robe bellows like a sail, making you feel momentarily like you might lift off the ground. You laugh at the thought and look around, but there is no one to witness it. Just you and the wind and your very dignified, slightly too long sleeves. Midday brings more sun than expected, and you find yourself loosening the collar, then tying your sleeves back with a bit of twine so you can finish trimming the vines. You sit for a moment under the eaves robe tucked around your knees like a blanket hands stained with soil and a hint of green sap. Your thoughts drift to the many layers of clothing now folded away in the chest, each one a kind of response to a different kind of weather, a different kind of day. This one you think was made for transition, not quite winter ready, but no longer summer soft. It belongs to a season in between, just like your mood. Later in the day, you prepare tea with roasted barley, the kind that tastes like toasted bread, and quiet afternoons. As it steeps, you change into another robe, this one a bit lighter, with embroidered cuffs and a lining made of silk scraps sewn together like a quilt. It's your company robe, though no guests are expected today. Still, the act of changing feels right. Autumn, after all, is not only about protection from cold, it's about presentation, about emerging from summer's sweat and simplicity into the grace of polished hems and thoughtful details. You pour a cup and sit by the window, the light now golden, your robe catching that glow like a lamp wrapped around your shoulders. Across the courtyard, your neighbor is airing out their blankets, and you watch as they shake out a massive duvet, its corners flapping like lazy birds. Their robe is rust-colored, probably hemp, cinched tightly at the waist, with a sash too long for fashion, but perfect for practicality. The fabric puffs slightly with each movement, catching sunlight in ways that make it seem alive. You find comfort in that, watching someone else experience the same shift, the same recalibration of cloth and temperature and purpose. It feels like a shared ritual, even if no words are exchanged. In the evening, you light a small brazier in your room, just enough heat to keep the edge off. You sit beside it, cross-legged on a cushion robe, now folded around your legs like a cocoon. The scent of the burning charcoal mixes with cedar and tea, and you let yourself sink into that moment. The sounds, the textures, the warmth. Your sleeves trail slightly on the floor, and you don't bother adjusting them. They're not in the way. They're part of the stillness. You reach for a book of poems, one bound in bamboo and thread, and flip it open to a familiar page. The characters are worn at the edges just like your robe, and you trace them with your fingertip, enjoying the way the fabric of your sleeve glides over the paper. Before sleep, you carefully fold your robe, brushing off the bits of garden debris it collected, smoothing the wrinkles with your palm. You hang it where it can breathe overnight, letting the fabric release the day. Then you slip into a nightrobe of soft quilted cotton, dyed a pale brown that makes you think of almonds and sleep. As you settle into bed, you tug the blanket up to your chin and feel the slight scratch of linen sheets against your skin. It's not unpleasant. It reminds you that you're present. And tomorrow, the robe will be ready to hold a new kind of day. The first true cold snap arrives in the middle of the night without warning. You wake before dawn to find that your breath is visible in the lamplight, curling in pale threads above your blanket like the ghost of a conversation. The floor is too cold for bare feet, so you slip them into cloth slippers and reach for the thickest robe in your wardrobe, the winter one stored so carefully so long ago that it still smells faintly of dried orange peel and cedar wood. It takes a moment to slide your arms through the heavy sleeves. The lining, brushed and padded, wraps you instantly in silence. The collar hugs your neck like a quiet companion, and by the time you tighten the sash, the cold has retreated from your skin, though not from the air around you. You move slowly through the house, not because you're tired, but because this robe demands a certain grace. It's not the kind you wear when you're rushing to catch a falling pot or chasing after a loose hen. It's the kind of robe that makes every step feel ceremonial, every turn of your wrist deliberate. You place your hand on the teapot with reverence, waiting for the warmth to spread from your fingertips back into your chest. The firewood crackles faintly in the stove. Even the sound of it is different in this robe, muffled, more contained, as if the layers of fabric have thickened not just around your body, but around the world itself. The windows are fogged over from the temperature difference, and as you rub them clear with your sleeve, you catch sight of frost on the roof tiles, each one glinting under the early light, like the roof has grown scales overnight. The robe you're wearing is dark blue with a deep green trim, both colors nearly indistinguishable in the low light, and yet somehow it feels vivid. The sleeves are wide, but weighted, lined with a second layer of wool that makes your arms feel like instruments of quiet importance. You sit by the window, hands tucked into the long cuffs, and sip tea that's slightly too hot, just to feel it burn away the fog in your throat. By late morning, the house has begun to wake. You can hear someone shaking out a rug in the courtyard, the thump, thump, thump rhythm like a slow heartbeat echoing through the walls. You decide to prepare the warmer bedding, unfolding a quilt thick with cotton batting and layering it over the sleeping mat. Your robe drags a little on the floor as you move, but you don't mind. It sweeps dust aside as you go like a broom that has read poetry. You pause for a moment, fingers sinking into the quilt, and think about how every fabric in the house seems to change character when winter arrives. The thin gauze curtains now look absurd. The summer shirts hung to dry now look like they belong to someone far more optimistic, but the robe you wear, the robe knows what this is. It was made for this. When you step outside to collect firewood, the robe becomes both shield and signal. The neighbor's boy sees you from across the fence and bows slightly before going back to his task. He's wearing a short coat patched with old indigo fabric, clearly handed down through siblings, and though it's less refined, it carries the same sense of intention. You nod back, hands wrapped around your sleeves for warmth, and move to the woodpile. Each log you pick up leaves a thin dusting of ice on your cuffs, and you brush it off without thinking. The robe absorbs the cold, but never lets it reach you. It's like a wall, but made of memory instead of stone. In the kitchen, you prepare congee with ginger and preserved plum, the kind of meal that warms the chest from the inside out. Steam rises as you stir, clinging to your lashes and curling into the folds of your robe's collar. You leave the windows open just a crack enough for the smell of smoke and rice to drift out and the scent of pine from the courtyard to drift in. It's a trade you're willing to make. You eat sitting on a low stool, the robe folding around your knees like a curtain drawn in against the cold, and you stay there long after the bowl is empty, simply watching the flame flicker beneath the pot. Later, you bring out the sewing kit, It's time to repair the corner seam of this robe where the fabric has begun to wear thin. Not from neglect, but from service. You lay it across your lap, smoothing the edge, inspecting the stitching as one might examine a map of old roads. The wear is exactly where your elbow bends when you pour tea. It makes sense. You thread a needle with brown silk close enough in color to disappear once sewn and begin the slow, careful work of repair. The needle moves in and out like a breath, steady and sure, and you hum softly as you work, not a song really, but something between sound and thought. You aren't trying to make the robe perfect again. You're making it honest. As the sky turns gold, you take a short walk beyond the gate robe, wrapped tightly, and slippers swapped for sturdier shoes. The air outside is crisp enough to make your eyes water slightly, and every breath tastes like iron and firewood. The robe creaks slightly with each step, the fabric thickened from cold and movement, and the sound reminds you of walking through dry reeds in late autumn. There's no one else on the road. Just you, the chill and the warmth that clings to your back like a secret. You don't go far, just enough to remind your limbs that they still know how to move even under layers, just enough to let the robe feel the wind it was built to withstand. Back home, the warmth of the brazier welcomes you like an old friend. You remove the robe carefully folded along the seam lines and place it over the wooden rack to air. It steams faintly where the hem is still damp, and you watch for a moment as that mist drifts upward, disappearing into nothing. You change into your sleeping robe, a thinner one, but still lined, and pour a final cup of tea for the evening. The house is silent again. The frost is back on the windows. You trace a small shape into it with your fingertip, then wipe it away. This robe, you think, is not for beauty. It is for endurance. And somehow, that makes it even more beautiful. The morning begins not with light, but with sound. A soft knock at the door, followed by the rustle of paper and the muffled footfalls of someone retreating into the snow-dusted distance. You rise slowly, slipping from beneath the thick quilt, and feel the cold bite at your ankles as you reach for your winter robe. It's the same one from last week, though. You've added a hidden patch of rabbit fur to the inside collar, stitched in with care and just enough secrecy to make it feel like a small indulgence. As you slide your arms through the sleeves, the robe greets you like a familiar presence, its weight both reassuring and dignified. It moves with a kind of solemn gravity, the way certain trees bend in the wind, not in fear, but in recognition of the season. You open the door and find a small bundle wrapped in oil paper, a delivery from the local tailor. Inside is a new sash, woven from silk and cotton threads, dyed the color of toasted chestnut. It's firmer than your previous one, designed not just to hold the robe in place, but to anchor your posture during long hours of sitting. You tie it carefully around your waist, adjusting the knot 3 times until it rests precisely where your hand naturally falls. Then, after smoothing the robe's pleats, you step out into the courtyard. The snow has fallen unevenly, revealing patches of stone and dead grass like memories refusing to be buried. The hem of your robe brushes across the ground, collecting a dusting of white that melts almost instantly, leaving darker lines like brush strokes in a painting you don't remember starting. Today you've decided to repair the window screens. The cold wind has begun to sneak in through the edges, curling around your ankles at night like an uninvited cat. You gather your tools, thin paper paste, a small knife, and sit cross-legged in the outer room where the light is brightest. As you peel away the damaged panels, the robe adjusts with you pooling around your legs like a silent witness. The sleeves stay close, held in place with ties at your elbows, a style borrowed from scholars and poets who couldn't afford ink-stained fabric. The replacement paper is crisp, bone-colored, and as you paste it into place, you notice how the fibers shimmer slightly in the light, like frost held together by breath. Your robe absorbs the moment without comment. It doesn't shift or wrinkle or protest. It simply holds you as you work. By midday, you've finished 5 screens. You stand to stretch the robe rising with you, then falling with a soft sigh as gravity reclaims it. You walk slowly to the kitchen, hands tucked into your sleeves, and prepare a lunch of millet porridge and salted greens. The steam from the pot fogs your lashes and warms your face, and when you sit to eat, the robe wraps around your knees like a blanket, one you didn't need to ask for. After eating, you light incense and place a few pine needles onto the coals. The smell reminds you of winters past, not specific ones, but the general memory of cold mornings, warm tea, and quiet conversation. You write a few lines in your notebook, sleeve pulled back so the ink doesn't smudge. A robe doesn't ask to be noticed. It only asks to be worn. In the afternoon, you venture into the storage room to retrieve the festival lanterns. The room is dark and chilly, and the air smells like old paper and forgotten promises. You crouch, lifting the robe's hem just enough to keep it from brushing the dusty floor, and search through the baskets. You find them still intact, their red silk faded to a kind of muted sunset. Back in the courtyard, you hang the first lantern from the eaves, your sleeves billowing as you stretch upward. The movement feels exaggerated in the cold air, almost like a dance, and you can't help but smile. The robe ripples slightly as you step back to admire your work, and you realize how much it shapes your gestures. You don't just wear it, you move because of it and through it. As the sun begins to lower, casting long shadows across the courtyard stones, you change robes. The second one is ceremonial, not elaborate, but formal enough to honor the small ritual of the evening. It's charcoal gray lined with silk, dyed from ash bark, and when you tie the sash, it creaks faintly at the knot, a sound that makes you pause and smile. The robe is stiffer, less familiar than your usual winter wear, but it fits your posture perfectly. You step outside again, lantern light flickering against your sleeves, and begin sweeping the walkway. The broom moves in wide arcs, your robe flowing behind each motion like a wake in still water. There's no one watching, but that doesn't matter. You sweep for yourself, for the rhythm, for the sound, for the quiet sense of readiness it brings. Evening falls with deliberate stillness. You return inside, robe slightly scented from the pine smoke that's begun to drift across the neighborhood. You pour yourself tea, black earthy, with a hint of bitterness that lingers on the tongue, and sit by the window to write again. This time, your sleeves trail slightly across the desk, and you let them. The ink dries slowly in the cold, giving you time to consider each word. You write about thresholds, the one between seasons, between warm and cold, between day and night. And you write about how robes like thresholds mark transitions, not with sound or force, but with presence. Later, you undress carefully. The ceremonial robe is folded along its seams, wrapped in cotton, and placed into its drawer with a dried chrysanthemum sachet. Your usual robe is waiting on the screen by the stove, still warm from the earlier sun, and you slip into it as if it never left you. You sit for a moment on the floor, the fire low, the silence steady. The hem of the robe rests on your toes, and you press it there gently as if to keep the warmth from drifting too far. You don't feel tired, but the world feels ready to sleep, and that readiness wraps around you like a second robe. You lie down, pulling the quilt over your body, and the robe folds beneath you, its creases soft, its scent faint and clean. The weight of it lingers even after you close your eyes. And in the stillness that follows, you realize something simple but true. The robe is not a costume. It is not a symbol. It is not even a tool. It is a companion, one that knows when to be silent, when to hold you, and when to disappear. There's a kind of hush that settles over the world after the snow has fallen all night. You wake into that silence, not startled, not rushed, just aware of it, like waking into a room where someone is already sitting quietly. The robe you wore to sleep is soft against your arms as you push aside the quilt, but you don't rush to rise. Instead, you lie still for a moment, letting your eyes adjust to the glow seeping in through the paper screens. It's not sunlight exactly, but snowlight, the way white covers everything and reflects upward, bathing even the darkest corners of your room in a gentle illumination. You finally stand, slipping your feet into house shoes that have grown chilly overnight, and you cross to the wardrobe where your thickest winter robe waits folded ready and completely still like a loyal sentinel. The act of putting it on feels more sacred today. The air is colder, not in a cruel way, but in a way that insists on attention. The robe is dark brown with embroidered clouds, near the hem a pattern you had commissioned years ago when the tailor still used thread dyed in crushed bark and walnut skins. The fabric is heavy, thicker than most, yet as it settles onto your shoulders, it doesn't press down, but rather feels like it's anchoring you in place. You tie the sash slowly, not because you're tired, but because it feels wrong to rush a gesture so intimate. When you slip your hands into the wide sleeves, they disappear completely, and you smile at the thought that you're no longer a person, but a moving bundle of warmth and silk. You step outside to find the courtyard transformed. Everything, stones, trees, the top of the well cover, is coated in clean, undisturbed snow. The footprints from the day before have vanished as though time simply decided to erase its own memory. You don't speak. You don't even exhale too loudly. You just stand there for a moment, wrapped in your robe, letting the hush of the snow meet the hush of the fabric. Somewhere in the distance, a crow calls sharp and sudden, then disappears. You begin your morning walk not far, just around the inner path of the garden. The robe swishes softly with each step, trailing a subtle line in the snow behind you. And as you walk, you imagine you are a brush painting calligraphy. No one will read but the sky. Inside again, you prepare a pot of rice water and ginger. The kettle takes longer to boil in the cold, so you sit beside it, elbows resting on your knees, the sleeves of your robe hanging like draped curtains between your hands and the floor. You rub your palms together for warmth, then blow gently on them, watching the vapor curl up and fade like breath turned to smoke. When the kettle finally whistles, you pour carefully, the steam clouding your glasses and warming your cheeks. The robe absorbs the moisture just a little, and you know it will carry that scent of ginger and rice all day. You sip slowly, not for flavor, but for heat. And think about how robes like these were never made to impress. They were made to endure. After breakfast, you begin your task for the day, mending the fabric storage covers for your seasonal clothes. These covers, made of linen and lined with paper, have been scratched by mice or worn thin at the seams. You sit cross-legged on the floor robe, pulled around you like a circle of stillness, and begin to unthread the damaged seams. The movement is repetitive, rhythmic, and strangely calming. You hum without thinking, a low tune with no melody, and the sound of the thread pulling through cloth becomes your percussion. With each stitch, you remember the hands that taught you this, the grandmother whose robe smelled like wood smoke and dried tangerine peel, the tailor's apprentice who always whistled when he worked. Your own robe creaks slightly when you shift, as if reminding you that it, too, is a result of someone's careful hands. By midday, the sky has turned from white to gray, and snow begins to fall again. You stand to close the shutters, brushing the edge of your robe against the sill, and notice how the snowflakes cling to the fabric for just a moment before melting away. You leave the shutters slightly open so that a soft, filtered light can still slip in. Then you return to your work, this time stitching a new tag onto one of the covers, small characters that indicate the season and year. You write carefully, the brush held steady in your robe-wrapped hand, and when you're done, you blow gently to dry the ink. The tag flutters slightly as if acknowledging your effort. The robe you wear has pockets, deep ones, and you find yourself slipping your hands into them more often than usual. Not to hide anything, but simply because it feels like a small comfort. In one pocket, you keep a small stone, smooth and dark, given to you by a friend who claimed it brought good luck when rubbed between the fingers. In the other, a dried plum for later. As you move through the house, adjusting lanterns and shaking out mats, the robe moves with you, not stiffly, not lazily, but with the grace of something accustomed to both stillness and action. It does not cling. It does not resist. It simply responds. In the late afternoon, you light a small fire and sit beside it, warming your sleeves one at a time. The robe drinks in the heat, slowly, like old cloth always does, and soon you feel warmth pressing gently into your forearms. You take out your notebook and begin a new page, the ink flowing more smoothly now that your hands are warm. You write about silence, about snow, about how certain robes carry not only warmth, but memory. You write a sentence, then strike it out, then another. The robe makes no comment. It simply continues to sit with you as it always has. Evening comes softly, with the light fading into a gentle lavender. You prepare a bowl of noodles with scallion and vinegar, eating slowly while sitting cross-legged near the fire. The robe wraps itself around your legs again, and you press your palm to your knee through the cloth, marveling at how something so simple can feel so essential. After dinner, you step outside one last time to check on the snow. It has thickened. The path you cleared earlier is nearly gone again, and you know you'll have to sweep it tomorrow. You pull the robe tighter around your shoulders and close your eyes just for a moment, listening to the quiet world breathe. Back inside, you prepare for sleep. You take off the robe, gently folding it with care and placing it on the cedar bench. You smooth its back, patting it softly as if to say, "Thank you." Then you put on your night robe, lighter, paler, more suited to dreaming. and crawl beneath the quilt. The scent of ginger still lingers in your hair, and the warmth of the robe remains on your skin like a memory that hasn't quite faded. You lie still, letting your thoughts drift. Somewhere in the house, wood creaks. Somewhere outside, snow shifts. And somewhere deep in your chest, you feel the weight and the grace of a garment that has carried you through a quiet, perfect day. The lanterns have been taken down, their faint scent of wax and smoke lingering in the air like the final notes of a melody. The courtyard feels bare without them, but also wider, quieter, as if the sky above it has grown larger in their absence. You wake later than usual, the quilt pressed closely to your chest, the weight of winter making time feel like it moves through syrup. You don't get up right away. You lie still listening to the wind bump gently against the windows like an old friend trying to get your attention without disturbing your rest. When you finally rise, you reach for your thick robe, the one with the deep green trim and a small repair on the left sleeve where you once caught it on a splinter from the doorframe. The stitch is visible only to you, but you touch it every time, a habit more than a necessity, as though acknowledging that even the strongest fabric is not immune to living. This robe, you've noticed, fits you differently in winter. Not in size, it hasn't changed, but in attitude. The way the fabric folds when you tie the sash, the way the collar sits snugly against your neck, the way it muffles your movements into something deliberate. There's a gravity to it, a sense that when you wear it, you move through the world as if carrying not just yourself, but the memory of everyone who's ever worn something similar. You step into the hallway, your feet bare for now, and feel the wooden floor under your soles. It's cold but clean, and the chill is softened by the way your robe moves with you gently brushing your calves like a whisper that follows. In the kitchen, you decide to make tea differently. Today boiled with orange peel cloves and just a few shavings of dried ginger root. The smell is immediate and enveloping, and you lean over the pot as it simmers, the steam fogging your lashes and warming your cheeks. You hold the clay cup with both hands, your sleeves falling forward, hiding everything but your fingers. It's a simple comfort, one you've repeated so many times that your body understands it before your mind even has to ask. Outside, the sun rises without ceremony, casting a pale wash of light across the snow. Your robe absorbs the brightness quietly, its dark fabric offering a soft contrast against the white just beyond the door. After tea, you return to your bedroom and open the chest that holds your off-season garments. It's time you decide to check what needs mending before spring arrives. The air inside the chest is cool and faintly herbal, perfumed by the sachets of dried chrysanthemum and sandalwood you tucked inside months ago. You lift each robe gently, unfolding them on the mat. The colors feel strange, lighter, louder. Pale blues, washed-out peaches, warm yellows. Fabrics meant for days when you forget about wind and remember how it feels to sweat. You examine the seams, the inner linings, the sashes. Your winter robe watches from its hook, a quiet observer. You find a tear near the collar of a spring robe, small but sharp. You sigh, set it aside, and begin threading your needle. Your fingers work automatically. The motion of stitching is as familiar to you as brushing your teeth, as walking down the hall in the dark. And yet, with every stitch, there's a decision. Pull here, ease there, not gently. Your winter robe pools around your legs as you sit cross-legged, the fabric thick but flexible, and you shift now and then to keep the circulation in your feet. The silence is full, not empty, not waiting, but whole. It's the kind of silence that comes from being completely absorbed, the kind that makes you forget about time until the sky shifts and you realize the light has changed. You break for lunch, just something simple, warm rice, pickled radish, a soft egg with a slightly runny yolk. You eat slowly, not because you're distracted, but because the pace feels right. Your robe guards your lap like a loyal pet, catching stray grains and drops of soy sauce without complaint. You think about washing it, then decide against it. Tomorrow, perhaps, or the day after. For now, you like the way it smells like time spent near steam and firewood. After lunch, you step out into the courtyard again, broom in hand, and begin sweeping the walk. The snow has melted slightly, turned slushy and gray, and your broom scrapes along the stone with a satisfying rhythm. The robe keeps you warm, but you can feel the cold through your slippers seeping in like a quiet reprimand. You shift your weight brush faster, move deliberately. The cold is something to acknowledge, not escape. Later, as the sun leans westward and the shadows stretch like sleepy cats across the walls, you begin organizing your writing desk. It's a mess, not of neglect, but of ideas. Loose sheets, bits of charcoal, a sealed stone wrapped in cloth. You stack the papers, dust off the surface, light a small stick of incense, and sit to write. Your sleeves are long, but you fold them back, tying them gently with a silk ribbon. The robe falls softly against the sides of the chair. You begin to write, not with urgency, but with that strange sense of purpose that comes only when your surroundings are exactly how they should be. You write about the weather, about the way tea changes flavor in a clay cup versus porcelain, about how certain memories return only in winter. Your hand aches after a while, but the robe keeps your body warm, your focus steady. The scent of the ink mingles with the scent of the robe, and the whole moment feels like something you'll try to describe later and fail because words are not smells and warmth is not easily captured in sentences. Evening comes not in a rush, but in layers. First, the shadows darken, then the wind picks up slightly, then the lamps in nearby houses blink to life, one by one. You light yours, watching the flame catch and grow steady. You change robes just for a while into a house robe that's lighter, more suited to the tasks of night. You fold the winter robe carefully, placing it on the bench near the brazier where it will stay warm. As you move through the motions of evening, washing your face, adjusting the bedding, checking the doors, the lighter robe allows for quicker steps, for lifted arms and bent knees. But it doesn't replace the winter robe. Nothing can. It's just a different kind of companion, one that understands that rest requires different armor. You return to the brazier cup of barley tea in hand and sit in silence. The coals glow faintly, and the room smells of warmth, dust, and something almost like cinnamon. You think of your robe folded nearby, and of how tomorrow you'll wear it again, and the day after that, until the season shifts enough to make its weight unnecessary. But for now, it remains the garment that carries your days, that remembers the curve of your shoulders and the way you like to sit with one knee up. It is not beautiful, not compared to the embroidered silks in the chest, but it is yours. It fits the moment. And in a life where so many things feel borrowed, that is no small comfort. You wake to the faint crackle of frost splitting on the window pane like tiny stars being born in slow motion. The light is pale, not quite morning, not quite dawn, just that indeterminate silver glow that seems to stretch endlessly in winter. You pull your robe tighter around you, not out of cold, but from the softness of habit. The same dark gray fabric that wrapped your shoulders yesterday now folds along your sides with familiar weight. You rise without a sound, your feet brushing the floor, your sleeves trailing slightly behind, as if they haven't fully woken up yet either. There's comfort in this quiet, in this unspoken routine. The robe absorbs your movement, the way snow absorbs sound gently without resistance. Down the hallway, the brazier has cooled. You kneel beside it, unwrap the cloth bundle of charcoal, and set a few pieces inside. The spark comes reluctantly flickering into being before it dares to grow. You lean in close, cupping your hand around the flame as if whispering encouragement. The fire catches, steadying itself, and soon the faint warmth begins to push back against the sharp cold. In the room, you stretch out your legs and let the robe pool around them, the fabric rippling in soft waves. As you sit there, not yet ready to start the day but too awake to remain still, you begin to hum. A tune you don't remember learning. One that likely came from a grandmother or neighbor or traveling merchant who passed through long ago. The sound isn't beautiful, but it's honest, and the robe vibrates gently against your ribs with each note. Eventually, you make your way to the kitchen. There's no rush, and the rice hasn't soaked long enough anyway. You put on a kettle and slice a few thin curls of dried tangerine peel. As they hit the hot water, the air fills with a bittersweet perfume that clings to the folds of your robe like a scent memory you don't want to lose. You sip slowly, sleeves drawn tight over your hands, and stare out at the snow-covered courtyard. The lantern poles are bare, now thin shadows on white ground like the spines of a forgotten manuscript. You watch as a few birds peck cautiously along the stone path, each one pausing between steps as if measuring their place in this quiet world. Later, as the light shifts to a wider, sharper tone, you begin your day's task, brushing your outer robes and airing the ones that haven't been worn yet this winter. You unfold them one by one, placing them neatly across bamboo rods near the open window. The air is cold, but dry, perfect for pulling out the scent of storage and allowing the fabric to breathe again. Some robes are embroidered, others plain, but all are weighted with time. You take a moment with each, running your fingers along the stitching, checking the seams, gently patting dust from the sleeves. The robe you wear today is your working robe, dignified but forgiving. The kind of garment that knows how to move with you through dust and motion and light and pause. At midday, the sun filters in at just the right angle to catch the folds of fabric like waves across a still sea. You pause to admire it, not because you seek beauty, but because beauty insists itself on you. Your robe in this moment seems not to clothe you, but to participate in something larger, a stillness, a rhythm. You sit down on the step with a cloth bundle of roasted peanuts and pick through them slowly, the shells snapping quietly under your fingers. You don't eat quickly. You rarely do. You chew each bite thoughtfully, letting the flavor unfold while your robe creases softly at the elbows and adjusts itself across your lap like a cat settling into sleep. After lunch, you begin sorting through a pile of old sashes and belts, trying to match them with their respective robes. Some are still fragrant from last season, others have lost their scent and require airing. You tie and untie knots, testing the flexibility of the fabric, remembering how each sash once sat at your waist, some higher, some lower, some tighter, on days when you needed more discipline. You laugh to yourself at how something as small as a belt can dictate the mood of an entire afternoon. You find one particularly faded silk sash almost translucent from age and hold it up to the light. For a moment, you wonder if it's even strong enough to tie again. But your robe wraps around your shoulders, firmly grounding you in the present, and you fold the sash away without regret. The rest of the afternoon is spent in silence, mending a torn robe from your summer collection. It's a pale gray one, light and soft, meant for evenings when heat lingers, even after the sun disappears. But today, it lies in your lap like a ghost of a warmer world. You stitch carefully using thread dyed with walnut husks. Your movements deliberate, your breath steady. The robe you wear now is darker, heavier, but it does not resist the memory of summer. Instead, it anchors you as your fingers do their quiet work, reminding you that seasons return, that nothing is truly gone, only waiting to be remembered. By the time the light fades, you've completed the seam and folded the repaired robe into a neat square. You change into your evening robe, a softer one with wider sleeves and a looser collar. It carries the faint scent of jasmine from the sachet tucked inside its lining. As you move through your evening rituals, sweeping the floor, refilling the kettle, brushing your hair, the robe moves with you like a second breath. Not rushed, not tired, simply aligned. It doesn't require attention, but you give it anyway, smoothing its collar, adjusting its hem. It responds with quiet dignity, letting you inhabit your space without interruption. You end the day with writing, as you often do. Sitting by the fire, you begin a new entry in your journal, the ink slow to dry, the cold air. You write about small things, the way the sunlight bent across your courtyard wall, the rhythm of the sash you retied 5 times before it felt right, the warmth of your robe after an hour by the brazier. You write without judgment, letting the details accumulate like snowflakes, each one delicate, but together something solid. When you stop, your hand is ink-stained and warm, your breath steady. You place the journal back on the shelf and sit in stillness for a while, letting the quiet settle into your bones. Then you rise, remove the robe, and fold it neatly. You trace the line of its collar with one finger, smoothing the fabric with care. You hang it gently on the wooden hook by your bedside, where it will rest until morning. You slip into your sleeping robe, soft and light, and lie down beneath the quilt. As your body settles, you feel the shape of your day still wrapped around you, not in thoughts or worries, but in warmth. The robe has done its work. It held your silence. It followed your rhythm. It remembered for you all the small things worth keeping. The wind begins before the sunrise, a low murmuring sound that rolls across the tiled rooftops like distant water. It rustles the bamboo in the courtyard and knocks once softly against the outer gate. You're still beneath the quilt when you hear it, that early hush of motion, whispering that the world is already moving, even if you haven't. Your robe hangs where you left it on the cedar hook, in perfect stillness, absorbing the early cold. You rise with slow, precision hands, pulling the robe around your body like a second skin. The fabric is stiff at first from the chill, but within moments it begins to ease, bending with your joints softening where it touches your warmth. The sash falls into your palms like a ribbon of memory, and you tie it once then again until the knot rests at your waist with quiet certainty. The floorboards are colder today, and you move faster to light the brazier, your feet whispering against the polished wood. The fire hesitates, but soon begins to breathe. You crouch in front of it, both sleeves tucked up over your hands, and you watch the flame come alive. This morning's ritual feels older somehow, perhaps because the wind is louder, or perhaps because something in the air is shifting. The robe, too, feels like it knows pressing against your collarbones with just a little more weight than usual, like it's reminding you to pay attention. You oblige. You sit there a bit longer than necessary, letting the fire and robe do their quiet work. You move next to the kitchen, lighting the lantern as you pass. The air inside the jar of rice is dense and cold. You measure carefully and rinse the grains with water that smells of copper and frost. The sleeves of your robe pull back just far enough to allow your hands freedom, but not so far that your wrists are bare. As you drain the rice and set the pot to steam, you glance toward the courtyard and see that the sky is pinking at the edges. It's going to be a cold, dry day, perfect for robe airing if the wind doesn't interfere too much. You pour yourself a small bowl of barley tea and sit at the kitchen door sipping it slowly while the sky unfolds. The robe pools at your feet, and you notice how the light bounces gently off its surface, giving it the look of moving water, even when perfectly still. After breakfast, you carry the bundles of spring and summer robes to the outer corridor, where the breeze is strong enough to lift the hem of each garment, but not so harsh as to damage the fibers. You hang them on rods, spacing them evenly, letting them wave slightly like polite flags. Your winter robe stays on, of course. It guards you from the chill as you move between garments, checking linings, retying knots, smoothing hems. Each robe seems to speak to you in a different tone. One hums softly, another creaks at the shoulders. A third lets out a faint sigh when you shake it loose. You respond silently, offering each one a moment of attention, a kind touch. The robe you wear doesn't complain. It never has. But you notice how it rests differently against your spine today, a bit more snug, a bit more watchful, like it knows this is one of its final days before being folded away. By mid-morning, your hands are stiff from wind, and you retreat inside, rubbing your fingers together to summon circulation. You warm them over the brazier, then begin the more delicate task of brushing the embroidered robe set aside for the spring festival. This one is older, more formal, worn rarely, but it carries the scent of last year's celebration. Red candles, paper lanterns, sweet rice cakes. You use a soft bristled brush, making long, even strokes across the fabric. Your winter robe overlaps with it at the knees as you work, and the contrast of texture rougher. Winter weave against the silk brocade makes you pause. You feel like a bridge between seasons, between utility and ornament, between the everyday and the once a year. In the afternoon, you steep another pot of tangerine tea and write a letter to your cousin in the South. You describe the weather, the flavor of tea, the way the birds have returned to the garden wall. You include a sketch of the robe you're wearing, not for vanity, but because you know she'll ask. She always does. She collects robe patterns like some collect pressed flowers, admiring the way threads curve, how colors layer, how garments shape the mood of a room. Your drawing is simple but accurate, a wide collar plain cuffs a single-stitched seam at the hem that you repaired yourself after last year's spill. You mention that the robe is due for washing soon, and as you write it, you feel a faint sadness. The robe has served you well. It has kept you present. Later, as the light begins its slow descent into amber, you sit at your work table to inventory the sachets and scent bundles kept in your linen drawer. The pine ones have lost their strength. The chrysanthemum bundles are too brittle to refresh. But the sandalwood and clove still linger, their aroma rising like breath from the folds of cotton. You replace what needs replacing, your fingers quick, the robe shifting slightly with each motion. Its sleeves bump gently against the edge of the drawer, and for a moment you imagine it trying to help. A foolish thought, but not unpleasant. You take a walk around the house before dinner, just a short circuit to stretch your legs. The wind has died down, but the air remains cold. Your robe clings a little at the ankles with each step, and you feel the weight of the day in your shoulders. Still, you walk. You pause near the well to adjust a loose tile on the edge of the roof. You brush a fallen twig from the doorway, small acts of care that feel more meaningful because you do them in silence. As you move, your robe becomes part of the landscape, gray against gray shadow, moving through shadow. When you return indoors, you light the evening lanterns and prepare a small bowl of soup. You don't eat with ceremony, just ease. You sit near the fire again, back straight, legs tucked under robe, surrounding you like a quiet lake. The fabric grows warm quickly, holding the fire's heat and pressing it gently into your skin. After dinner, you spend time writing again, this time not a letter, but your personal journal. You reflect on the rhythm of the day, the sound of the wind in the morning, the hush that followed. You mention your robe only once, noting how it seems quieter than usual. Then you laugh a little and scratch the line out, not because it isn't true, but because it sounds sentimental. And yet, the robe stays with you as you write, as it has stayed through so many hours before. When bedtime comes, you move with deliberate pace. You fold the robe carefully, not yet ready to store it away, but acknowledging that its season is nearly done. You press the folds flat with your palm, smoothing every wrinkle, whispering thanks with your fingers rather than your voice. You place it in the cedar drawer with a sachet of sandalwood and a small pressed flower, tucked just under the collar, a private ritual that no one else will see. You change into your sleeping robe and slide under the quilt. The bed is warm from the day's fire, and your body carries the memory of the robe like an afterglow. As your breath slows, you think of all the days that robe has held for you, the silent walks, the steady stitches, the cups of tea and paper letters, and you wonder for a moment what you will become without it, not in absence, but in transition. The final days of winter arrive not with fanfare, but with a subtle loosening. The frost still lingers at the edges of the courtyard, and your breath still curls into soft clouds in the morning, but there is a different tone to it now. The wind carries less sharpness and more scent, barely there, like the memory of plum blossoms not yet visible. You rise early as always and dress with quiet reverence. Your winter robe greets you like an old friend, its weight familiar, its seams softened by countless days of wear. You drape it over your shoulders, tying it one last time with the same knot you've used all season. There's something sacred in this routine, something final without being mournful. You step outside to sweep the stone path, your movement slow and even. The robe trails slightly behind you, gathering dust that it's gathered 100 times before. The courtyard is quiet, but not still. Birds have returned, hopping between bare branches, arguing gently. You pause mid-sweep and watch one of them twist its head toward the rising sun. It seems to know something you don't. Or maybe it just remembers spring better than you do. You smile and return to your task, letting the broom's rhythm mark the end of the season. Each stroke feels like a punctuation mark, not an exclamation, something more like an ellipsis. After breakfast, you begin the ritual of transition. You bring out the spring robes from their cedar-scented chest and lay them across the bench by the window. The colors surprise you. Soft greens, pale ochres, faded lilacs. They look too bright for this light, too eager. But you don't rush. One by one you shake them out, fold them anew, and hang them on rods to catch the breeze. The winter robe stays on as you work, grounding you, protecting you from the last traces of cold. But even it seems to know its time is nearly over. It no longer resists the folds in its sleeves. Its weight feels gentler, more yielding. You move as if you're preparing a guest room for someone dear. By midday, you're seated by the brazier, a needle in hand, mending the final loose thread on your lightest spring robe. It's a robe you haven't worn in over a year, one that was too fine for last season's errands, too light for last year's chill. But today, as your fingers work the thread through the seam, it feels just right. The stitch is small, almost invisible. You tie it off, carefully trimming the end with your teeth, then press the seam flat against your thigh. The winter robe covers your lap like a curtain, the spring robe folded neatly above it. You sit there for a moment, the contrast between them not lost on you. This is how time moves, not in leaps, but in layers. That afternoon, you decide to wash the winter robe. The moment feels ceremonial. You draw warm water into the basin, add crushed soap berries and a pinch of salt, and let the robe soak. The water clouds quickly, releasing the season's memory into liquid. You press the fabric gently, not scrubbing, not wringing, just encouraging it to release what it has held. The scent that rises is something between smoked tea and dust. You don't mind. You rinse it twice, then press out the water carefully and hang it across the courtyard rail where it flaps once in the breeze before settling. The sight of it drying in sunlight feels like closure. You step back and bow slightly, not out of superstition, but gratitude. Evening comes with a thinner kind of light, one that feels less like an ending and more like a beginning. You dress in your newly mended spring robe, and though it feels unfamiliar at first, less insulating, more vulnerable, you grow into it quickly. You prepare dinner with sleeves tied higher, noticing how your arms move differently now, how the lighter fabric catches the air when you walk across the room. Your reflection in the teapot side startles you, not because you look different, but because you recognize the season behind your eyes. You eat, simply listening to the soft creak of wood and distant temple bells. After dinner, you return to your writing. The journal opens easily to a fresh page, and you begin. Today, I retired the robe. You pause, then cross out retired and replace it with thanked. It's more honest. You write about the way the fabric changed over the months, the way the sleeves remembered your habits, how the collar creased exactly where your neck curved. You describe the feeling of cool water, soaking into thick weave of hanging the robe in sun, that finally felt warm. Your words are careful, but not clinical. You're not preserving an object, you're preserving a presence. When it's time for bed, you retrieve the winter robe, now dry and faintly crisp. You fold it slowly, smoothing each panel, aligning the cuffs and hem, tucking the sash inside, like a promise. You place it in the bottom drawer on top of a sachet of dried osmanthus and close the lid without a sound. Then you stand in your spring robe, the room cool but not cold, and exhale, not relief, not farewell, just breath, the kind you take when you know you've carried something well. You lie in bed, your spring robe folded neatly on the stool, your winter robe packed away like a chapter gently closed. The quilt is warm, the air is still, and somewhere just beyond the paper screen, a night breeze stirs the leaves like a lullaby. Too old to remember, but too familiar to forget. The light of the lantern has dimmed, leaving only a soft amber glow around the room, and your breathing slows to match the silence. This, then, is the true shape of ritual. Not the dramatic gestures or the declarations, but the quiet daily folding of cloth. The pause before tying a sash, the way your hands know exactly where to rest on a robe's collar. The season doesn't change in a single breath. It shifts through your fingers, robe by robe, sleeve by sleeve. You realize that even without meaning to, you've woven yourself into the rhythms of these garments, not just as their wearer, but as their witness. It's strange how something as simple as dressing could hold so much weight, not because of fashion or status or beauty, but because it forced you to be present. Every morning, a moment of stillness. Every evening, a ritual of release. These robes didn't just cover your body, they marked your time, your care, your noticing. And as you lie here now, the quiet wraps around you just as surely a final robe made of breath and memory and night. Tomorrow, there will be new tasks, new routines, maybe even a robe you haven't worn in years. But tonight, you rest with the comfort of having carried each day with purpose. You gave attention where no one asked you to. You mended what didn't need to be perfect. You noticed the sound a sash makes when tied just right. And that is no small thing. That's the story. For tonight, may your dreams be filled with wonder and peace.